Shane sent out an email to confirm for next week. Perfect. Huh? I'm sorry. I doubt it, because 11 and 12, and see, he won't cover it probably. He should. You want me to suggest that? Okay, I'll suggest it to him.
All right, we got 4 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. We're starting off the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please pause for a moment of silence here. First item on the agenda is citizen concerns. It's any concerns that are not already on the agenda. Go ahead. State your name, address, and your concern.
Maria Ranquist, 3131 Norman Drive, Sioux City, Iowa, 51104. I am concerned for the pipeline that is coming, Navigator CO2. So, and I'm encourage all of you to approve a letter to the IUB objecting to eminent domain for the carbon capture project by Navigator CO2 venture. To me, this is an example of corporate greed. Digging through our agriculture areas and the Lost Hills. Landowners across the state are teaming up with the Iowa Sierra Club to stop the pipeline. The hazardous liquid pipeline will damage our greatest natural resource, our land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I do another issue?
Okay. Yeah, let's keep it about a minute.
Okay. I received a statement regarding the compliance of the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. This is the United States Department of the Treasury rules, and it has been sent to the press across Iowa. And I see in your budget that you allocated $10 million to the prison, to the jail that is coming. So instead, the COVID vaccinations, testing, contact tracing, clinics, PPA. So $10 million is going to the jail. So I consider you to follow the rules of the United States Treasurer. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else today here?
I'd like to comment. I'm on the phone, please.
1 second. We got somebody else here in person. Go ahead here.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, name and.
My name is Carol Hennings. My address is 1970 Garner Avenue, Mobile, Iowa, 51039. I'm here to object to the Carbon Summit Solutions pipeline that's being pushed across the state of Iowa. I have done quite a bit of research on this, and I have found that private ownership of land is a fundamental right protected by the U.S. Constitution and also by the Iowa Constitution. The first right is the right of possession. The second right is the right of control, which means I have a right to take care of our land. The third right is the right of exclusion, which means we have a right to say no if we do not want someone to come across our property. The right to derive income, and that we can rent the land out, we can lease it out, we can do whatever we want to with it, but it has to be with our approval. And the right of disposition, which means that we can sell it, we can give it away, we can leave it in a will, we can do anything that we want to with it. And I feel that the rights of the landowners of Woodbury County, their rights are being violated by these pipelines. Summit Carbon Solutions is a privately owned, privately funded, for-profit company. If you allow Summit Carbon Solutions to come through Woodbury County and put in a pipeline, what's the next privately funded company that's going to come through? Maybe it's going to come through in your backyard. You don't know. Because our piece of land is just like 1.3 miles from the border, or from the border of Sioux City. Please, please take a stand against these pipelines. Stand up to them. It's all for profit. It's for money. And it is of absolutely no value to the landowners of Woodbury County. Thank you.
Thank you. And if it's about our letter to the Utilities Board, that is on the agenda, so is this about something not on the agenda?
Well, this is about the pipeline.
Can we keep it till we get to item 14? Any other comments on the pipeline? It's kind of related to agenda item 14, and this is concerns not on the agenda.
Okay.
And then we had an individual on the phone.
Yes, good evening. This is David Bashaw with United Today, Stronger Tomorrow, Communities Respond to COVID. Thank you, Supervisors. I hope you had a good and healthy holiday. To tag on to what Maria Rundquist had said in regards to the U.S. Treasury's final ruling, I would like to quote from the general overview from that final ruling, where the Treasury presumes that the following capital projects are generally ineligible, including construction of new correctional facilities as a response to an increased rate of crime, constructions of new congregate facilities to decrease the spread of COVID-19 in that facility, and construction of convention centers, stadiums, and other large capital projects intended for general economic development or to aid impacted industries. Construction of these new congregate facilities, which would generally be expected to involve expenditures greater than $1 million, would generally not be a proportional response to mitigate or prevent COVID-19. This essentially claps back at many of the arguments that were made by the Board of Supervisors when our coalition was pressing to have these COVID recovery funds go to deliverable gains for the community. This was our exact concern, is that these funds were being potentially misappropriated, and if it came out that it was that way, that there may need to be some kind of repayment that would fall on the back of the taxpayers. It only increases my fear and the fear of your constituents when, and I tweeted to Matthew Young a statement regarding this, and the response I got back was, and I quote, "Money is fungible, in case you didn't know that." My only question today would be to Mr. Ung, if he would be able to explain to his constituents what he means by that, where this money is going to come from if it cannot be used from the COVID recovery funds to cover this 31% inflated costs for this law enforcement facility. The call to action that I would have is with these new rulings and the reaffirmation that the Treasury recommends public input, I would ask if there could be some kind of discussion to have meetings with the public to have discourse on how these funds should most properly be spent. So thank you, folks.
All right, moving on, item number 2, that is the approval of the agenda.
I would move it, Mr. Chair.
I'll second that. Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Any discussion on the agenda? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Is there somebody on the phone else? Is Rocky on there?
Yes.
Okay.
I was an aye.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear. So that passes 5-0. Moving on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 11 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3, approval of the minutes of the January 3rd, 2022 meeting. Item 4, approval of claims. Item 5, from Board Administration. A, approval of lifting tax suspension for petitioners who failed to recertify their income or income does not qualify for continued tax suspension. B, approval to reappoint Patrick Curry to the Commission to assess damages, Category D. C, approval resolutions thanking and commending Christine Garthreich-Werka and Deborah Heath for years of service with Woodbury County. Item 6, from Building Services. Approve an item to be sold per personnel property disposition policy. Item 7, from Human Resources, approve memorandum of personnel transactions. Item 8, from the Auditor, receive Auditor's quarterly report. Item 9, from Conservation, approval of appointment of Tom Limoges to Conservation Board. Item 10, from Juvenile Detention, receive the Juvenile Detention's December population report. Item 11, approval of letter of support for the...
Part of the consent agenda, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Approval of letter of support to the City of Sioux City Wastewater Treatment Facility's application for water infrastructure grant funding. All right, any discussion on any items on the consent agenda?
I'd move it.
I'll second that. Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item 12 for Siouxland Coalition Against Human Trafficking. We have an approval of presentation of proclamation naming the month of January Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Do we have a copy of that, or did you want to come up for that too?
You're going to read it, right?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. I can dig through it. All right. So the proclamation reads, whereas the United States was founded upon the principle that all people are created with an inalienable right to freedom and added the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, making slavery illegal, and whereas slavery within the United States today is most often found in the form of forced labor and sex trafficking, which weakens our social fabric, increases violence and organized crime, and debases our humanity, and whereas this proclamation is found even within our community, and whereas every business, community organization, faith community, family, and individual can make a difference by choosing products that are not made by forced labor, by working to protect our young people from sexual exploitation, by addressing the problems of internet sex trafficking and pornography, and by becoming more aware of the problem and possible solutions. Now, therefore, Woodbury County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim the month of January 2022 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And did you want? Do I just give this to her?
We need it back.
Okay, we need it back. All right, well, I'll give it to her and she'll get it to you.
Okay.
But thank you very much. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the information. Yeah, if you'd like to say something, go right on up and, of course, state your name and everything there as well.
Absolutely. My name is Sister Shirley Finneran, 3021 McDonald Street in Sioux City, Iowa, 50104. And I'm representing the Siouxland Coalition Against Human Trafficking. I'm also the founder and director of Lila Mae's House, which is a house for adult women who have been sex trafficked. And I'm also on the Iowa Network Against Human Trafficking and Slavery. And actually today is National Human Trafficking and Slavery Awareness Day. So a great day to do the proclamation. So when many people think of human trafficking, Many people, including myself, years ago, thought this only happens in other countries, and unfortunately, slavery in the form of trafficking of people is very much alive in Sioux City, in Woodbury County, in Iowa, and in every community across the United States. In the last 3 years, I've talked to over 4,000 people, including kids as young as 8 years old who need to know about trafficking and need to know about the situation. If you have children, you have grandchildren, social media is the #1 way that kids get trafficked and adults get trafficked. So as we know, social media can be very good today, but for trafficking, it's the way into getting into having conversations with kids and then wanting to meet later up. So Lila Mae's house is located in Sioux City, and in the last year, we have helped 6 different women. One came back twice for another stay. So we help heal and women and provide a safe place for them to be, to deal with the trauma and to live the rest of their lives as best they can with what they've experienced. The trauma never, ever leaves them, but we do our best to help them. So encourage all of you to support. If you want anyone to talk to your organizations, just give us a call. We do that very much. So thank you very much for the proclamation support.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, I'll move the approval of that.
Second?
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item 13, Community and Economic Development. Consideration of an ordinance relating to the assessment of wind energy conversion property as authorized by Iowa Code, Chapter 427B.26.
Thank you, David Gleiser, Director of Community and Economic Development. Just give me 1 second here, I get set up. All right, so I think I will start by providing a real brief recap of our last 3 public hearings and approved readings for this proposed ordinance. And I'd start by just letting you know that on December 3rd, the official notice regarding this action was published in the Sioux City Journal. And on December 6th, we issued a press release to all local media outlets in the county regarding the same information in our official notice. On December 7th, we actually held our first public hearing and conducted the first reading. There were no members from the public in attendance, and as of that date, we hadn't received any other official written or stated public comments regarding the ordinance. We still have, to this date, not received any official written statement comments. During that public hearing and discussion, I essentially characterized the 427B26 ordinance as being the essential companion piece to the commercial wind energy ordinance that we recently have passed. And I said this because the wind energy ordinance, that establishes the rules that people need to follow in order to apply, operate, decommission a commercial wind farm in our county. And the 427B ordinance establishes the tax classification that we will choose to use when we assess these structures and equipment. Should we treat them like any other electrical utility in the state and let the Iowa Department of Revenue assess them as a state-assessed utility, which is subject to the replacement tax? Or should we treat them as any other piece of commercial or industrial property in the county and let the county assessor assess them as local property using the tax exemption schedule provided in Iowa Code? I informed the board that, my office had contacted numerous counties, relevant stakeholder groups, agencies across the state, and what we learned is that every county in Iowa that has a commercial wind turbine has also adopted the 427B26 ordinance. I shared some of the benefits and ideas that other counties in Iowa who have adopted the ordinance and what they've realized and how they're using their new influx of local property tax dollars. And some of those projects and ideas include paying for the cost of a new county jail, sharing 50% of the cost to help a rural school district improve their existing facilities, help a school district build a new school, repair old county bridges, pave new county roads, invest in local economic development projects. And if they choose not to utilize TIF, it will simply lower the levy rate by bringing in such a significant and steady amount of property tax. There was some confusion at the end of our first public hearing regarding what the revenue potential to the county would look like under replacement tax versus the 427B ordinance. And there was a mischaracterization of how the county would receive revenue under the utility replacement tax, as Dennis was just letting us know that the backfill payment, or that replacement for the 90% commercial and industrial backfill, that is going away. And so I think we were sort of using replacement tax and the commercial backfill payment interchangeably, but those are two completely separate different things. And that's really what I tried to hone in on our second public hearing. I started by clarifying the difference between those two, and I summarized a video conference call that our county assessor and I had with Miss Julie Royson and Roland Simmons from the Iowa Department of Revenue. And, I explained that during that call, they confirmed the commercial industrial rollback backfill payment is indeed going away, as Dennis described, but that the utility replacement tax will remain as is. And we did learn that when an electric utility company is subject to utility replacement tax, tax increment financing cannot be used to capture any of the incremental value from any of the new equipment or structures that are built. However, 100% of the replacement tax revenue goes directly to the county. She informed us that the 427B ordinance must be adopted to use TIF for these projects, which is assumed as being one of the main key reasons why every county in the state has adopted this ordinance. And when I asked her if she could help me do the math for the utility replacement tax for a hypothetical wind project, she just flat out refused to do so and stated that there were too many factors unique to a specific company in their system to be able to just plug numbers in randomly into these variable boxes and come out with something that's meaningful. So she recommended that I either have a developer who's proposing a project provide me with their estimates using their unique and specific data in the code section, or work with our local utility partner to verify the math, or she said that they're the most experienced with that formula. And she did say that I asked her what would happen in the event a county doesn't adopt the ordinance, or if it's repealed and we have these commercial wind turbines. And she said that she believed the code is not clear as to whether the assessment of these structures would be implemented under 44.121. That's the section on actual assessed and taxable value, or 437A, and that's the chapter for taxes on electricity and natural gas providers. I gave copies of both of those code sections to the board that night, and I would also acknowledge that, Ms. Royson said there is a state-level utility replacement task force who was going to be recently convening to study the effect of replacement tax on local taxing districts and consumers. It was really to be geared more along the lines of wind turbines in counties that are at the age of they need to be retrofitted. And so a lot of questions on, did they start over at 0? Do they start right up at 30? And then there were some questions about if a county doesn't adopt it, whose responsibility is it? When I asked her what she thought is going to happen, she said she believed the recommendation regarding how commercial wind would be assessed with or without the 427B ordinance would be under the replacement tax, as would interconnecting substations, as she was guessing. Now, whether or not the task force will actually provide any formal recommendation to the legislature, I don't know. And, there's some comments, or I guess we can make some comments in terms of strategy in holding out for a scenario where the assessment might be locally and at a greater amount, like Supervisor Taylor had suggested one idea. So that brings us to our third public hearing, and I'm going to try to wrap this up quick. During that public hearing, I try to spend most of my time showing the board what the revenues would look like side by side. And Karen, you can pull up that PowerPoint, and I have the spreadsheet still here for you if you like. But it's just basically what Mid-American Energy gave me for a hypothetical 100 megawatt project under the replacement tax or under the 427B ordinance. And, you know, it was obvious that over the 40-year useful life of the project, the county would receive significantly more revenue in the form of property tax under the 427B ordinance than it would under utility replacement. Roughly $30 million more. And I informed the board that our local utility partner will not influence our county staff or our elected officials. They will not tell us how we should manage our budget. So Mid-American, they will not say one way or another if they want us to adopt the 427B ordinance. And they just need to know if we're going to adopt it or not. And again, towards the end of that discussion, Supervisor Taylor stated he had spoke with Ms. Royce and himself to better understand, you know, why would a utility company want to pay a county more under the 427B ordinance than the replacement tax? And I think what had happened during your conversation, or my assumption, is that this gray area that we're talking about in terms of whose responsibility is it to assess, the idea of having our county assessor do it locally at 100% full boat would definitely get us sued. If we do not adopt the ordinance and we get a commercial wind turbine and we don't go to the Department of Revenue and we ask them to assess it under the replacement tax, and instead we just go out and have our county assessor assess the property 100%, we will most likely get sued. And when you were explaining that during that last hearing, I wasn't quite following the legal implications. And so just recently, I was on a phone call with our bond counsel talking about another project and, you know, some formalities that we got to do for our urban renewal plan. And at the end of the conversation, I asked them, or I just basically gave them an update, because those folks have been providing me with guidance and support throughout this entire process. And what they said was that Supervisor Taylor was right, that if we assess it locally, we would definitely get sued by that respective utility. And he said that their understanding of the law has always been that without the 427B26 ordinance, utility replacement tax is the normal rule, and it would be centrally assessed by the Department of Revenue, the same as all other electricity generating facilities. He said the idea of assessing it locally at 100% is not an option he's ever heard of, and he asked me if we believe the statute gives our assessor the legal authority to assess it. I informed him I think that's under legal review, and he said, well, that's good, but basically you folks need to adopt the ordinance and move on, because there's no way in this world the utility lobby in this state would go back to locally assessing utility companies at 100%.
Who made that statement, David?
What's that?
Who made that statement? You folks need to adopt this and move on.
Yes.
Who made?
Our bond counsel.
Which?
John Danos.
Okay.
Well, and when you read the
wanna address
background,
that in a
sure,
minute.
go ahead, but when you read the background information on the utility replacement tax and why it was created is because cities and counties were assessing properties at 100%, and that's why they created the utility replacement tax.
Correct. I mean,
And
the
then-
easiest way I can explain it is like back in the 70s, everybody in Iowa realized the way that we were assessing our utility companies was at a detriment to competition. And so folks got together and they came up with this formula. There was consensus and it was agreed upon and passed into law that this is how they would be assessed. And then along comes wind turbine technology, and the legislature provides a special exception to let them convert it back to property tax. Possibly an unintended consequence of that was the ability to use TIF. I don't know if that was the intent when they made that special exception or not, but clearly they discounted it significantly because they weren't going to go back to charging them 100%. So I think that, you know, while it might sound like a good idea and that we might stand to gain 70% more of those numbers that I presented, I cannot recommend as a professional that that would be the strategy we should embark.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make clear that we asked our legal counsel, who sits on this board, to review this. I'm not sure if you knew that we were going to outside legal counsel to get an opinion to tell this board, you need to adopt this ordinance and move on. Our legal counsel hasn't weighed in that I know of. And were you aware that John Danos, our outside legal counsel, was weighing in?
No, but I wouldn't, you know, if he's doing his job, he's going to
Yeah,
ask
I have been
an
working
attorney.
with them this entire time.
Right, but I just
From
wanted,
concept to today.
right, but we asked our assistant county attorney to do a legal review, who had not heard this information, is that correct?
Not prior to tonight, correct?
Okay. So I just think as far as process that we need to
Get
allow.
the attorneys to talk, yeah.
Right, because I think that's important, first of all, that we have the respect of our assistant county attorney if he wants to weigh in. I just wanted to make that point.
And actually, did you have anything on it from reviewing?
I know you've been reviewing it, so if you wanted to weigh in.
I mean, I read it all, and I think it's either or. I didn't see a, you know, that's my,
I think there is some gray area in the statute. There are others that are far more familiar with it than I am. But I think that there could be some further review of what the options are. I think ultimately it would come down to something that the assessor is comfortable with, and the board's not in a position to tell the assessor to assess in a certain way, and the
I
assessor.
understand that.
The assessor has the obligation to follow the law and what her best understanding of what the law is. So to some extent, that's beyond the control of the board, as far as the board couldn't direct the assessor to assess in a certain way. And there is often safety in numbers, as far as if everyone else around the state is interpreting a statute in a certain way, then often there's a reason for that. But like I said, based on my somewhat limited review, I do think that there was some gray area.
Well, I mean, I guess the way that I've looked at this, and I've read this a million different times, I believe that this idea or this notion that as a state, we would move back to local assessment of our utilities at 100% is not a legitimate option that would be bought in by most of the people listed on that task force, as well as numerous agencies and organizations across the state. I think if we move to assessing our utilities back to 100% local property tax, I really can't speak to how that would impact the way our utility partners conduct business in Iowa today. I feel like, you know, what we've been really doing is splitting our hairs, really trying to figure out what's in it for them, or what's the best, why would they want to do this or that. And, you know, I'm glad that the discussions that we've had have been focused about how are we going to manage the revenue, and not necessarily about what industries get certain types of breaks or whatnot. But I would say that, you know, if you want to give a wind developer or an electric utility the biggest break that we can possibly give them in Iowa, then I would say do not adopt that ordinance and hit them with the replacement tax, because they will pay far less. But if you want to get the most revenue we possibly can out of these projects, then I would adopt the ordinance can it use that revenue to lower property taxes or effectuate other economic development goals in the county?
And that's where, to me, you know, when I read the code, I get the intent of it. The intent of why they passed the law is to, you know, make Iowa more competitive and not tax them at 100%. So to me, that says there's no way you're going to get away with taxing them at 100%. And if I were Mid-American or whoever, whatever energy company it is, the first place I would see is in the courthouse. So I just think it's either 427B or what was it, 426 or something on the utility replacement. But that's how I see it, and I guess as a board, we make the decision as a board. I don't know, and, you know, I don't know what you guys are thinking.
I think it's been a really good conversation, and honestly, I think that, like, you know, Jeremy bringing that piece of information to that last meeting helps the conversation, it helps the dialogue. I think that, you know, personally, I would say that I would advise against holding off from passing this ordinance in hopes of the task force or the legislature making some sort of change, you know, because we could deploy that strategy that we're gonna hope that they're gonna change it to 100% locally assessed, you know, or we could deploy the strategy of maybe they will completely outlaw wind turbines in Iowa, and so then we won't have to worry about this stuff. But I don't find either one of those a realistic option that I would, you know, jeopardize future county revenues.
But are those companies perhaps also waiting on the legislature to move into different counties based on that potential need for more legislation?
Guys, I think it's gonna be, if anything, it's gonna be replacement tax.
To me, it's a little disingenuous to have Mid-Americans say, we don't care what you do. We're completely agnostic. And then say, but if you do the thing that you think is appropriate, we'll see you in court and we'll sue you. I mean, this is a public utility that is asking taxpayers, and all of you in the room, to subsidize them at 100%. And then 95%. And then 90%, 85%, 80%, 75%, and then 70% into perpetuity, forever and amen. No private industry has asked Woodbury County for such a deal. Neither CF, nor AGP, nor Gelita, nor any other economic development. What we're asking, I think, is come to the table, engage our county. We could get together and we could talk about some sort of abatement schedule that's fair. Instead, it's, you're going to adopt this ordinance. And if you don't adopt this ordinance, we're going to only realize about 20% of that revenue, or we're going to sue you. How's that? That to me doesn't seem like any sort of real economic development by a multi-billion-dollar public utility that says you've got two choices. Adopt this ordinance, or we're going to pay you far less, or we're going to sue you. No, I think that this board ought not to take any action tonight and to simply defer on this ordinance. Otherwise, vote it down, but I'd prefer that we just defer on this until some later time or indefinitely. Those are my thoughts, but I may be in the minority, so.
Legal counsel is suggesting that there's some gray area that invites further exploration. And just so everybody in the room understands, that gray area represents a vast sum of money. Enormous. And so I think we...
70% more than that number.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. So I understand some of these decisions are made at state level, right? But yeah, I don't see the harm in taking a wait and see approach. How difficult would it be if this is adopted? How difficult would it be to get out of this if we learn in 2 years that there's a sweeter deal?
Impossible.
Well,
It's impossible to get out of it.
I mean, so.
And that would invite a lawsuit as well if we tried to pull out of it.
Well, you could pull out of it, and anything that was built in those 2 years would be under this ordinance, but anything built after would not.
But it's a one-shot
Correct.
deal. We don't have any illusion that there's going to be another major investment by Mid-American. I mean, once this is done, you'll be Marion County in their 19th year suing.
Let's just say that we don't adopt it, it gets dropped, and then a commercial wind development comes. And then the county's gonna receive those revenue projections like we put up there. And I think it would be unfortunate that we would receive those amount of revenues when we could receive that column amount of revenues. This other column of revenue that you're talking about, I don't think it's in the code. I think these other two are. And I think that's why everybody's, from Julie Royson to other staff in her office to the lady that drafted the minutes of the task force meeting, I asked everybody, what do you think it's gonna be? It's replacement tax, guys. I'm not trying to lie or I wouldn't try to stall us or put us in a position where we're gonna get a worse deal. You know, I mean, if I think I can get us a better deal, I'm gonna wait. But I'm just saying, you kick the can down the road, I don't think it's gonna do us any good. So that's all I have to say.
Is that you, Rocky, chiming in?
Yes.
Can't really hear you.
Again, if you want to get mad at the legislature giving these industries these kind of exemptions, then talk to them. These are the rules that we
It's not the legislature if we're passing it. We're giving them 100% next year. If we don't pass this, we're not giving them 100%. And you can say there's only one black and white thing, and our assistant county attorney says that's not quite true. And you can say there's only one black and white thing, and Julie Royson says that's not quite true. And so I don't think it's get mad at the legislature because they're giving them this. You're asking us to adopt an ordinance. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to. And we would be mad at the legislature who said 99 counties, which less than half of have, so let's be clear about it, less than half of the counties have adopted this. The majority of counties have not.
Every county in Iowa.
That has a wind turbine,
Yes.
right, but again, more than half
Well, why
of the
would they do
99.
that?
Yeah, but there's also,
Because they have maybe a fundamental objection. Why wouldn't the majority of them?
Or status
some have,
quo. I mean, maybe we need to lead on this.
I mean, if over 50 counties
If
have
you guys,
not.
if we think that we can be the one to change the landscape of how utilities in Iowa are assessed, well, then I'm with you guys. Let's do it.
well,
Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
I follow your lead, so you tell me.
We're about to.
speaking from my experience and the constituents reporting to me, I have yet to have a landowner say they want this on their property.
Are you talking about the wind?
The wind turbines, yeah. I
Okay.
have not heard yet from a landowner that wants one on their property, nor a constituent anywhere in the county that wants to see them.
This is Rocky, right? Doesn't sound like
Yes?
it. Just doesn't sound like you.
Mr. Raddick doesn't believe it's you. If you could say something that only he would know is true,
I like guns.
that's Rocky.
Well, it's definitely Rocky.
But if that's.
So
that's
I
the
don't want
way
to
the board wants to go,
misuse the input from the constituents either, and that's I don't want to lose sight of the fact of our constituents out there.
Okay, so what I might recommend doing is the council that was advising you, get their explanation, please, of why they feel it's an either or. I mean, I read it as that, and I'm not trying to insult our own attorney. I don't have a law degree, and I don't want one. But I do think it would be good to have kind of a specialist opinion on that. And I do think, I've been on Sioux City's council, and Sioux City was used as maybe an example of why the state should change some laws in the past. And I'd hate to see Woodbury County be the reason they're gonna change everybody utility replacement tax in the entire state. I don't wanna be that catalyst to all these other counties that are getting their 427 tax rates. So I would like to see some kind of opinion from them if
Sure.
that's possible.
I'll do that.
And
And I'll coordinate with Joshua in doing so.
I'd move to defer this.
well, let's just delete it from the agenda, and when we have that, we'll just bring that back as an information item.
My worry, Mr. Chair, is hearing the comments on the board, unless I'm in the minority, which I have been in the past, and I have no problem being. But we've heard, this will be the fifth discussion.
Sure.
Publicly, fifth very protracted discussion, and if having a legal opinion, yet again, not from our assistant county attorney who says there's some gray area, but going to outside counsel to find out is that's going to move this board to be in a majority position to adopt the ordinance, then I think that's worth putting on the agenda for a fifth time. But if not, I don't know what we're going to do by putting it on for a fifth or a sixth or a seventh. I mean, I think we're sort of exhausting the
Don't
thing.
you want to find out what sort of chance you have with this third option for the 100% assessment? I mean, I thought
That's-
that you would
well-
want to know that out of everyone.
We've asked it, David. I mean, my gosh, you heard it right here. You heard that there's a gray area from a legal opinion.
Yeah.
You've gone out for another legal opinion to say, no, you ought to just doggone pass the ordinance. What we're saying is, I'm not supportive of the ordinance. If there are other members that are supportive and that's going to matter to them, then I think go out and get that opinion. If it's going to simply protract for another hour, something that this board's not supportive of, I think you're spinning your wheels. So I just don't know. I mean, you can come back and we can talk about it again and again. Will that make a difference?
Well-
Supervisor Wright or Supervisor Ung or Supervisor DeWitt?
And I don't know that we're going after 100%, but there's a difference between what 427 allows us to bring in versus potentially what legal comes back with saying. Maybe there's a discussion to be had.
Well, there's too much money on the table.
40, 50 years ago, they made this decision for some reasons. Do we know if the reasons that they made this decision, have they been effective? Have they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish through?
Yeah, I believe it has.
So I personally, I feel there's too much money on the table to not get one opinion from somebody that specializes in this. And no offense to our attorneys here, but I mean,
Right, and I think that it is a highly specialized area, so there's some value in that. I mean, to this point, the question that I've been asked is, do I think that there's some gray area? I haven't been asked the likelihood of success or things like that, or to prognosticate on that. So I'm not advocating for one interpretation or the other. All that I've been asked is there some gray area? And I think that there's some arguments that could be made, but it's not a endorsement of one view or the other, or to say that we would have a great likelihood of success if we proceeded in a particular manner.
personally, I think it's just way too much money to leave on the table to not try to do our due diligence and do what's best for the taxpayer here. I think the best thing we could do for the utility is not do the 427B ordinance, which, you know, maybe that results in slightly lower rates for their entire market area, but at the same time, it's, I don't know, to me, I think we should do the due diligence, but we can delete it from the agenda and choose to revisit it if you want.
So without, say we don't adopt the ordinance and we get a wind turbine, then what's the step, I guess, is my question. 'Cause
How likely is that?
I think it's likely.
All the counties that
I thought
have
at the
this-
very beginning, the whole thing was we weren't going to, unless
I told
you,
that. I told you.
right, unless you adopt this, they're not going to come. Now we say we may not adopt this, and they say, well, this will be great for them. They'll be paying so much less.
Exactly.
Which one is it? It can't be both.
Well-
It can't be you have to adopt this ordinance or they won't
During
come,
the second public hearing,
and then they're, all of a sudden they become agnostic.
my initial reaction to this schedule was that it was an economic development incentive. The more that I learned about the history and the intent of the law and the creation of the replacement tax, I've changed my mind, because now I realize that discounting it down was a way to equalize and get it close, probably closer to the range of the replacement tax.
Can I ask a very simple question, and this should solve everything? The 50-some counties that don't have a 427B, how many turbines are there?
They don't have turbines.
Okay. So
Well,
this
there's-
whole,
well, there's
this
a-
whole
a zoning
canard
difference.
that, well, that's really what they want. They want you to not do this so that they can only pay 20%. Why wouldn't they go to the other 50 counties? There's 50.
Probably because it depends on if they have an ordinance to cite them, decommission them.
Okay.
Because we discussed the zone, well, you weren't here,
Some of
but
the counties
when
might
we
not
did the
have
zoning,
pattern. I don't
They
know.
might
We
not,
had-
but that's the whole argument, is that every single county that has a 427B has these turbines, and the majority of counties in Iowa don't, and there's no turbines to be found. I mean, at some point, just basic, maybe it's being the simplest one up here, but basic common sense has to come to bear that they wanted this, and now all of a sudden,
They asked if we were going to adopt it or not.
and now they don't want it, or they don't care.
they
They're
don't care
agnostic.
either way if we do or don't, is what they said.
Either way, the cost to construct these things are the same. It's the same amount of money to build these things, right? It's just the operational cost, the taxes that they're gonna have to pay are a lot less under replacement tax.
Or a lot more if they're locally assessed, which is what they may be fearful of in wanting to have an ordinance that says we won't pay anything the first year.
And I understand what you're saying to that point, Jeremy.
But the point I was trying to make on the zoning is, what was our setbacks, 1,000 feet?
Initially, and then we went to 1250.
1250. So when our engineer did different mapping, if you went out to 2,000 feet, you couldn't put a windmill anywhere in our county. So other counties were suggesting 5,000 feet. So in their county, if they have a 5,000-foot setback, you can't even put a windmill in their county.
That works for Montana.
Well, that works for, yeah, maybe Montana, maybe, the desert. But here, if a county has that kind of ordinance, they don't need a 427B. They're never going to have a
Yeah,
windmill.
some ordinances just
And-
flat out restrict them by the distances that are in the ordinance. So, yeah, we did a heat map, and we took every rural residence, and we put red dots on those, and then we put distances, different setback distances to see, I guess, how many turbines we could actually squeeze in an area. And so, yeah, the higher the setback distance, the lower amount of turbines that you can get in there. But, I mean, this is all good conversation, and if the board decides to take the stance that we want to be the first in the state to try to lobby for this, then I'll work with the board to do that.
I think in some ways this relates to the previous conversation about just whether or not we're inviting pipelines into the county in the first place. I think in further
Windmills.
exploring this, I think so. Because I think by taking a wait-and-see approach and learning a little bit more about this before we make a firm decision, I think we're showing the taxpayer, we're not just going to go belly up and just be a pushover to the corporate interests that want to do some things here in the county. We want to get a good deal for Woodbury County taxpayers. If pipelines want to come in, private landowners that are being asked to part ways with their land or give up some of their land, they better get a good deal. And that's your prerogative at that point. I know that you're kind of a little guy, and
It's still the windmills, though. You're saying pipeline.
yeah, pipeline, windmills.
If I could offer this.
It's all energy. It's energy.
I know that the replacement task force is going to meet again pretty soon, I think maybe this Friday or next. And I've asked for a draft of their previous meeting minutes. I haven't gotten that yet, but I'm going to watch the next meeting and see if they actually are going to make a stand and say whether or not they're going to make a recommendation to the legislature on this particular issue of 427B or no. And I think that will be, probably the writing on the wall, because if they say replacement tax, do we still want to go to war and try to fight for 100% local assessment? Or are we just going to go with the flow and just do the 427B?
And just so it's clear, and I don't want to beat this dead horse, and appreciate everyone's patience in the discussion, just so it's clear, my goal would be to have Mid-American come and directly engage our county, like every other private entity does, instead of saying, okay, it's going to be 100%, there's not this either-or fallacy. Maybe it's a graduated abatement, maybe it's something where they're at 60%, 70%. There's all sorts of possibilities without being strong-armed toward you're only going to tax us at a maximum of 70%, or we're going to give you that much less, or we're going to sue you. You know, those don't seem like private industry, good neighbor kind of cooperation engagements. So, just so I'm clear.
You want to be in that sit-down?
Yes, he does.
Sure.
Anything else to say, or should we move on?
I'll say something if you let me.
I will let you.
There seems to be two major things at play. One is the money, and one is, do we want to play a role in wind turbines coming into Woodbury County? There's cases on both sides I see. On the one side, I do see the case for the money. I think it's not clear, but I see the case for it. On the other side, I see the case that what our action here would influence a company's decision whether or not to come into Woodbury County simply based upon the fact, and that's why I asked that question, that the ordinances are in those counties that have the turbines. You can't say that there's not a case there. So when you weigh these two different things, we get more money, but then we also have a role in bringing these in. In the role of bringing them in, as Supervisor DeWitt said, and I certainly haven't, it would be odd for someone to say we want a wind turbine in our backyard, granted, but that is, it is a real point that, our county is not like all these other rural counties that may have, you drive to Des Moines, you see just perfect topography. I'm not convinced Woodbury County has that topography. We have an urban and a rural mix. We have a lot of commuters. This influences a lot more people than we may think, and that may have an opinion on this based on those patterns. And so I just don't want to be, I can see the case for the ordinance, but at the same time, I don't want to be the step that causes these to come into our county if that's not what the community wants. And so as far as what we do, there could be some more background work done, but ideally, I would support the motion to postpone or defer, simply because if we would have deleted it, we would have done that at the beginning of the agenda. So those are my thoughts.
And to your point, Supervisor, if we as a county, as a community, come to consensus that we don't want these, then, the best way to effectuate that would be through our commercial wind ordinance, the document that I say, the good policy work that we did this last summer, because that's really the document that says, hey, we're open for this game and these are our rules. This other deal here is just how are you going to spend your money or save it or whatever. But I can work with Joshua and John Danos and Aaron Reagan. Those are the folks at Dorsey and Whitney that have been helping me on the 427B ordinance. And I will also contact the replacement task force. I will participate in their next meeting, and I'll also come back with the minutes from their last. And I think that their next meeting will give us a good indication of what they're going to suggest to the legislature, if they suggest anything. But, so we can take it from there.
Sure. You come up to the microphone and say your name again, though.
I just want to ask David a question.
Okay.
Have you ever asked any of the taxpayers throughout Iowa who have wind turbines if they like them?
Yeah, I've talked to people that have had them, and
Well, it's,
If they like the money they get
yeah.
from them?
And that's not necessarily something that's factor in this decision, but, you know, it is, but,
One of the, and I shared this at the last public hearing, but it's in our comprehensive plan, this effort to look at renewable energy as a source to alleviate the national electric grid as well as generate revenue for private property owners in Woodbury County. I think that's pretty much in our comprehensive plan. So we're just doing that, you know, we're just going through the motions of the comp plan, trying to see if this is something that will stick, and if not, then it won't. We'll move on, we'll keep doing good stuff.
do you want to defer to a date with this, Pat, or should we just make no action and come back and revisit on another agenda?
Either just have a motion to postpone action, or you can just no action taken.
I'd say we'll just go no action taken and move on, but it's up to anyone else who wants to make a motion.
I'll move to postpone.
Okay.
Second?
Motion by Ung, second by Taylor. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are postponing. Moving on to item 14, we have Board of Supervisors Rocky DeWitt, approval to draft a letter to the Iowa Utilities Board in opposition of carbon pipelines. Go ahead, Rocky, over the phone.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
Just in several landowners have contacted me, as I'm sure they have the rest of you as well, but Ms. Hennings earlier spoke, and I probably couldn't echo her sentiments any better, but I think that the board should be united in sending at least a letter supporting our landowners and their thoughts and rights as landowners of this great state of Iowa, that we support our landowners in their opposition to this pipeline, or any pipeline for that matter.
So I know a few others have weighed in. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Just appreciative of the letter and Supervisor DeWitt putting it on the agenda. I would like to hear from the gentleman who originally had wanted to approach the board, unless there's other board discussion.
Yeah, I have another question here yet. So on this letter, Rocky, it says deny any and all permits and or eminent domain declarations. Of course, my preference is anybody that is willing, offering to sell their land and have a purchase agreement where they're paid and not an eminent domain situation. I don't mind having a permit for something that was done without compulsion, but I do oppose anything that's done by force with eminent domain, especially for carbon. That does not seem like a utility to me. So I don't know, is there a distinction on that, Rocky, as far as permits gained willfully by sale of land or permits by eminent domain?
I guess I was stuck on the landowner's rights and how they have never come to me with anyone that wants it regarding the finances or whatever. I support landowners' rights, and I guess I didn't go into the direction that you're talking about. No.
Sure, that's not a problem. I think they kind of get the point of the eminent domain issue. Would it be okay to change that final line in your letter to deny all eminent domain declarations and not say the permits? Or am I being too technical?
I'd like to leave it as is. I just don't see the point of a corporation using eminent domain to gain broad access to private property, and let's not lose sight of the fact that our own county farm is potentially in that mix, and I don't want to see a devaluation of our property now or in the future if we decide to develop it or sell it. So I'm opposed to eminent domain for a private corporation in this regard.
Any other supervisors, any questions?
I support the letter.
Come on up, sir. Sorry to keep you waiting so long.
That's all right.
You got to hear more. You got to hear more about windmills than you ever wanted, I'm sure.
I'm up to date on that. My name's Jim Collier. I live at 1650 Old Highway 141, Sergeant Bluff. And I have a piece of property that runs adjacent to the county homeland. And Navigator wants to come on my side of this fence, which will be 300 yards out my back door. Plus, Summit wants to go where the power lines run through you guys' property, the county's property. So we're going to have two pipelines, and they're going to crisscross on the back side of my land, and I'm just asking for you guys' support to tell them we don't want this. And especially with eminent domain, and the prices they want to give us are not fair, because I've seen what they want to offer us. And to me, it was an embarrassment, especially when it's forever for them. And I wasn't aware that that land can be sold to another corporation. Once they get us to sign an agreement, it's like forever. You know, and that's my biggest thing is. And where they want to run the pipeline, we have had this piece of ground on the north end of our place, which is right along Old Highway 141, which is a beautiful spot to have a home. And it'll make it worthless. Because who's going to want to put a house there? And I mean, this isn't going to go away. This isn't going to be forgotten, you know, where these pipelines go. Because I went to both the meetings with Navigator and Summit, and I asked them, why do you want to be so close to Sioux City? It's all about costs, they say. Well, we're talking billions and billions of dollars. So what's another few miles a different direction, you know, where there is less population? And you know, we know that Sioux City is growing, not as fast as some, but it is. So I just want you guys' support to send them a letter, to let them know that, you know, this is a big concern for us. And it isn't about the money, especially I've been on this farm my whole life. So, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And I think, you know, Rocky brought this to the agenda out of kind of an outpouring of, you know, opposition coming to our meetings where we are not the final say. It's the Iowa Utilities Board. And, you know, of course, our engineer, Mark Nara, was kind of giving people the avenue to voice their concerns with the Iowa Utilities Board. But I do think, you know, seeing something like 30-some counties in Iowa now sending letters to the Iowa Utilities Board on behalf of their constituents, I think it says a lot to them as well.
There was a question asked at one of the meetings, and there was a gal there from the Iowa Utility Board, and it was asked to her, have they ever turned down? And she said in the 15 years that she's been there, they've never turned down a permit.
Sure. Well, and, you know, I think when you define a utility, I don't know if a carbon pipeline is necessarily a utility. I see things as energy related, you know, more of a utility. But, you know, I think we're probably going to be unanimous on this letter decision. I'm not saying I know how everyone's going to vote, but, you know, if you guys hadn't come and voiced your concerns over, you know, the past few months, I don't know that this would have been on the agenda. And so this is really a response to the public outcry here in our county. And seeing that other counties have done this, we think there's maybe a little more power in numbers. So with that, I'll move to the approval of the letter.
Second.
So come on up if you want to say anything else here. Sorry I didn't. We have just 1 second. Real quick. A motion by Raddick, second by Young.
I'm Gail Palmquist from Lawton, and our family's farm is on the pipeline path for Summit. And after listening to all this talk about the wind turbines, I'm envisioning the next step after the pipeline for Summit goes through that American Energy could come across my land from the other crosswise, because we have a ridge on our farm, and I might end up with wind turbines and pipelines on my farm. Now, is that possible?
Well, what's interesting is with the wind turbines, typically Mid-American will reach an agreement with the landowner and pay them to have them there and not use eminent domain. But ironically, wind is energy, which is a utility in my definition of it. So I think it's interesting that they have to go through that process, but this pipeline doesn't.
Can the Board of Supervisors prevent wind turbines with an ordinance?
Technically, yes. The county would get sued if we did, like Madison, Kossuth. I think Guthrie is another one that's recently been threatened a lawsuit. But there are people that are willingly wanting to put windmills, and we're not going to restrict their rights to do that either. So.
Yeah, have not heard of any yet.
Sure. Well,
And I have family pretty much across the county. But the other thing, let's see, what else was I wanted to ask? I can't remember. Oh, I was going to say, I've read several articles in the past week or so, and I don't think I forwarded those to you. I have forwarded some other ones to you about the pipeline, but they're saying now that wind energy is not exactly a friendly climate solution, because we have all these blades and windmills that are they're going to approach their 40-year limit. And they've already got bone piles scattered all over the country where they're dumping these wind blades. They're not only an eyesore, I mean, what are we supposed to do with those?
Sure. And it's not really related to the item we're discussing on wind, so, because we're discussing the pipeline letter right now, so.
All right.
But we hear your concern, but.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I don't want either one of those on my land.
Sure.
So my family's been part of this county, my husband's family, since the 1800s. And no private company has ever tried to get our land away from us. And I don't understand how you said they can own the land. That's
I
not
don't
my
know the
understanding.
process. I don't know.
They have a right-of-way to it, but they don't own the land.
That's what some are claiming, I believe, ma'am, but our letter tonight is in order to bolster your private property rights and to stand beside you.
Right, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to bring up those points in case there was any doubt of any of you that you wanted to not vote for this. So, but I thank you for doing that.
Sure thing. And come on up, sir.
I'll make this quick. I'm John Olerking. We own property south of the airport, the Southbridge Industrial Park there. We have a farm there. It's going to, both pipelines are going to be going through it. And as you know, you put the pipeline there, it's forever. We don't agree with eminent domain on private companies because we're close enough to the Southbridge. The future, just like you're talking about your county farm, it renders useless, cutting clear across the farm. Your valuation is gone. And they have it forever. So I strongly support your opposition to the pipeline. Thank you.
And I hate to say, but it might affect you more than anybody where your land is located, because the value of that as industrial land is very
Yes.
high.
When,
And when those pipelines are underneath,
it's just gone.
nobody can build there.
No.
And we run into this all the time on ground we have down in Southbridge. There's already pipelines all
Yes,
over
we got
there.
too many every farm we have has got a pipeline on it.
But most of those are at least natural gas or some kind of utility
Yeah,
line that,
which is a public company.
yes,
But this is
so,
private. I do not support that at all.
yep.
And
But
we
yeah,
looked at, solar people came in, looked over, and every one of our farms had too many pipelines on the setback regulations, that rendered them useless too. So that was a thing. So we're totally against pipelines.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Well, we have a motion and a second. If there's no other questions, I'd like to move on with the vote. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Moving on to item 15, Board of Supervisors. Thank you, yes. 15A, a motion to separate consideration Board of Supervisor pay from other elected officials. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This item is in order to be able to take our legal right, something that the legislature granted as they saw that most typically Board of Supervisors pay was tied in to other elected officials by recommendation of the comp board. We have an opportunity, I think during a tough budget year when we're trying to scale a gap to mitigate any sort of property tax increase. And I think one of the things that we could do is to lead by example, kind of a servant leadership sort of motion, and separate ourselves out. Currently, the comp board recommendation of the Board of Supervisors is a 22% increase to our salaries. I think that's inappropriate at a time when our union folks in a motor grader right now out in freezing weather are getting 2.75%. To take a 10 times as much raise for ourselves, I don't think is leadership. I think what we can do is to separate ourselves out from being lumped in with everybody else. And my follow-on motion, though I'll make it separately, is that we don't take a pay increase. I think that we who are called to this office are called to serve, and that's the reason I got into it. I haven't taken a pay increase since I've been on the board, but I believe that over the past 5 or 6 years there have been increases, and whether or not you've chosen to take those or not, I fault no one for that, but I believe that it's time, especially in this year, when we have such a disproportionate increase that's being recommended, to sever ourselves from being considered with other elected officials. And so those are my opening comments. We'll take any response before making any motion.
Well, I assume that most supervisors are going to have an opinion on this, but let's kind of take them in order there. Who'd like to go next?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
if this is such a bad year, Mr. Taylor, can you tell me which would be a better year?
No year would be a better year to take a 22% increase, in my opinion.
Well, I'm understanding that we're going to deal with the contracts as they come up, and that the contracts were made in good faith at the time. All the issues going on at the moment notwithstanding, and including inflation. So it's not my intent to leave the unions out of the deal, but I think you're being a little exaggerated in saying you're 10% or 10 times the raise. That's just the unions took their contract, signed it, voted on it, what have you, and at what point are we just going to stop saying that we can't find the right year to do this? I don't enjoy the fact that we're 39th in the state and we're the 6th largest county in the state. I personally think that it's a little bit, it almost looks like we want to avoid competition. So for several reasons, I'm opposed to your motion to separate and take the zero, but I'll leave it at that.
Anybody else? I know I'm going to support it. I feel like we're paid too much anyway, so go ahead.
I'll comment on the second motion more than this one.
All right. All right. I guess seeing it might be a little more divided, you want to do a roll call on it there, Pat?
Is there any other discussion, Mr. Chair? I didn't know if...
Just my thought on it, I'll let my vote do the talking to it. There's the argument that a lower salary dissuades people from pursuing the role. I know of 3 people on this board that I think are going to continue to try to continue to serve in this role. I will not be. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Chairman DeWitt's seat, and I got to believe that the Democratic Party is going to put somebody up against the three gentlemen that want to remain in this role. So, yeah, I don't want a pay increase, as Chairman Taylor, or excuse me, as Supervisor Taylor said. This should be about service. It shouldn't be about patting anybody's wallet.
All right, well, I'm going to ask for a roll call on it if no one else has anything.
So do we need a motion right now?
We already had it, didn't we? Oh, we didn't. I'm sorry, I'll go ahead and move it.
I would second.
Okay, you know what, we don't need the roll call, we'll just vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right, so passes 3-2. Moving on to 15B, motion to reduce supervisor salaries to a 0% increase for FY '23. Go ahead.
So I don't know that I need to go much further than to just make a couple of points in response. I think it's dangerous sometimes to simply look on population, and we're going to hear this argument. It's going to be made by elected officials, sort of a keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. I think it's important to realize we have one of the most high property tax intensive levies in the state. Top 5, actually. Which means that when you look at what's property tax poor, that means that what your taxpayers can afford causes a considerable strain. I think that if we just look at population, it'd be easy. In fact, the legislature could just rank us and say, you have no choice. We're just going to do this. But I think in a year, when we're trying to bridge this budget gap, and I think we've set ourselves up, quite frankly, by having a 22%. Because what's going to happen is if it's all tied together, then whatever we reduce, we're going to have to reduce commensurately. And we had to have, or some of us had to have advocated to our representative on the comp board that a 22% pay increase was desired, even knowing that there would be others that would be recommended at 9 or 11. So that is why I'm going to move to reduce the supervisor salaries to 0% increase for FY '23.
And I'll second, motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. Any other persons to weigh in?
Sure. Well, I did not advocate 22%. This isn't a vote for 22% necessarily. My thing here is, if there was data to support saying that county supervisors here are overpaid, I've shown I can go 1 to 4 with all of you, and I'd be the first one to put that on the agenda. We look at, we talked about comparables. We look at comparables when we consider the union contracts. If we don't, we arbitrate based on comparables. We look at comparables when we look at our wage plan employees and we compare them to our union contracts, of which we have several. When we approve or reduce or deny the elected officials' raises suggested by the comp board, which is the law, we look at comparables for every single other elected official position. Now, we say it's because they have deputies that rely on their wage, but at the end of the day, we look at comparables to reach that conclusion. But we don't look at comparables for the county supervisors for some reason. It's not borne out by the data. We are I believe the 5th based on 2020 population, and population does come with more. It's not just, you don't just have extra people in your county. You have more of a responsibility and a tax base, of course, and more responsibility in the budgeting process. So we are 5th, and as we've discussed, we are 39th in pay. It is not borne out by the data that county supervisors are overpaid in Woodbury County. Maybe maybe there's an ideology that we are, and almost every year we hear, you know, that Supervisor Taylor has not taken a raise and chosen not to, and that's fine, and that's his right. And he's to be commended for putting that money towards other things. Not all of us are in that position where we say where we put our extra money or where we donate or things like that, but that's the dialogue that happens on this board. And it's based on, the problem I have with it is it's based on us individually as elected officials and not based on the position. And that's what I think our duty is to look at the data, is to look at the positions, is to look at the reality and yes, do some comparisons. If we were 10th and we're 5th in population, that's a rounding error as far as a budget is concerned. But to think that, you know, to also to throw in that this is going to somehow alleviate the budget, I don't think that even if we all went to zero, we could afford the raises recommended by the comp board for the other elected officials. And that's important to keep in mind, that perspective. There's also a comment made about the cost to the taxpayer. Yes, I totally agree. Woodbury County is a property poor county in Iowa, and we need to raise taxes. We need to raise rates more than other counties do to generate the same amount of revenue across our property base, and that's a challenge for us and a challenge for our taxpayers.
Can I just clarify what you just said, because it just sounded wrong, but 1 cent equals 51,000 on our levy here, where 1 cent might equal 85,000 on somebody else's levy.
Of course.
Okay, so that's the clarification to what that comment.
Okay. But, you know, I've attended ISAC seminars where they lay out the property poor aspect and how that relates to taxation and the ease of raising revenue, and we are in one of the most difficult counties. But going back to the cost per capita, you look at the list of the top 39, since we are 39th, you look at the list of the top 39, there's only 2 other counties that have a lower cost per capita than we do. So we're doing right by cost per capita as well. So again, I see this thing as more of a personal belief, which is fine, than something that is borne out by the data, and I am just an analytical guy, and I try to think beyond my seat and my own paycheck and my own situation and my own desire to be popular politically, like we all in some ways have. So that is why I won't support this.
Anyone else?
Do you want public comment?
We're gonna all chime in as a board, then ask for public comment.
I have a question for Auditor Gill, not to put you on the spot, but do you recall the last time there were not 2 candidates for an elected position in Woodbury County at the supervisor level? And I had a conversation with somebody that I respect very much, suggested to me that when it comes to pay increases, you increase wages when you can't fill jobs with quality people. And I don't know that, I guess that decision is for you to make, whether you think we're quality people doing this job right now, but it sounds like there's always somebody that wants this position, and there's no need to increase the pay in order to get interested parties at this point.
How many other people from your other departments are going to receive 22%?
0, ma'am.
Pardon me?
0.
Well,
What are they going to say?
technically the recommendation in another department was what, 30?
There is one elected official bound by the legislation called Back the Blue that has setting the sheriff's increase at 35% because the comp board is mandated to look at like police chiefs and population. So that's kind of an exception, would be that elected official. But other than that elected official and his deputies, the sheriff's office, no one else.
And I'm not trying to, just a second. We still have to have the board all state their comments before I open it to public, and then you will have to come up to the podium to state your name before you ask questions. Sorry. So,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
to correct Mr. Taylor, the back the blue legislation would cost the county 31%, not 35%. But to clarify the 22%, that did include to the comp board what I thought was fair as a 9% raise due to cost of living and a 3%. Now, we all know it doesn't take a mathematician or somebody very analytical to figure out that inflation is much more, even in Mr. Taylor's own figures, that inflation is much more than 6%. And then when you add a 3% raise, that comes to 9%. And so I want to separate out the 22% as being 9% plus a raise, which still would not get Woodbury County anywhere into the top 20, if I remember correctly, and I think Dennis can verify that. But again, I wanted that clarification, is that I'm looking for 9% for all employees, and I know that I'll probably get some pushback because, oh, this is just a bad year, but I asked the question, when is a good year? And I got a negative, there's none. So you have to start someplace, Mr. Taylor. You have to start someplace. And my feeling is if we don't take care of our employees, we're going to start losing them. And in conversations from the board, hiring help right now is not easy. I would rather maintain the employees we have and take care of them than lose them and look for a replacement. Because I also feel that over the last several years, we've dropped the levy, and now there's literally not much left to cut. So in a fashion, we've painted ourselves into a corner. It looks good on the front page of the paper, but in reality, we've painted ourselves into a corner, and now we don't have any place to go.
Anyone else from the board?
Mr. Chair, may I clarify?
Sure, go ahead.
One little point. Well, first of all, I've explained to Mr. Taylor and Mr. DeWitt separately in conversation. I'm above where Taylor is, and I'm probably below where DeWitt is. When we talk about a raise and we talk about other employees, this is one reason I didn't want this broken out, is because I don't want the elected officials to be discussed before the employees. I want the employees to receive a raise and for elected officials to follow as we normally do. And that raise is less of a raise this year than it would be any other year because of the inflation issue. When you say, ma'am, you know, our employee's going to get 22%, that is the precise issue I did not want to happen in this process, is to get the elected officials discussed first. Because, and I say that because this board, to its great credit, I believe, has either taken a 0%, a 2.75, or a 3, I believe, in all cases lower than union employees. And that's part of the reason why it's borne out by the data. We're the 5th largest and we're 39th. We don't treat other elected officials that way. We do lead by example. We have led by example. We have continued to reduce in the face of inflation. And inflation is at least 6%. Social Security admits so much in the increased benefits in 2022. Treasury I-bonds are at over 7%. Those are bonds that track inflation statistics. So you give someone a 6% raise, they're not getting a raise. They're keeping up with inflation, which is not something Woodbury County controls. It's something the federal government controls, and we react to it. That's why we have contracts that come up every few years. And so I just want to be crystal clear. The board has taken a lower raise than its employees every year since I've been on the board. I would prefer that to continue, but I also believe this year is a year where we can't just get away with 2.75 or 3% for the employees. I think we need to do more because inflation is a real issue. It's not transitory. That is a lie. It is getting worse and worse and worse, and it is going to affect, at some point, staffing. Right now, county has very good benefits, but that only lasts so long when the private sector reacts much more quickly than governments do on an annual basis. And so it is indisputed that inflation is at least 6%. That is the low government number. For the CPI, they say if steak is too much, you just buy chicken. Well, what if you want to buy steak? There is inflation there. Some people, you know, they don't always transfer out their basket of goods. The way they compute it is the lowest number. It's normally very low. It's normally 1, 2, 3%. This year it's about 6. So I'm sorry that was a little longer than I anticipated, but I want that to be clear. I'm not talking about a raise. I'm talking about keeping up with inflation here.
And then, what'd you have there, Jeremy? Or did you forget it?
I think I may have forgot. I just want to make one last quick point. One of the reasons that I wanted to separate this out from the other elected officials is because I've never heard of, in the history of the County Board of Supervisors, double-digit increases, much less 22%. My worry and my hope for the future is that whoever is making recommendations to our representative on the comp board doesn't overswing like this. Because what would happen is if we remain tied in and we knew that we were going to be at, let's just say at inflation and said we're going to take a third, you know what that would do to everybody else. You know that the auditor's office would be going from 9 to 3%. You know that the deputies in the auditor's office would be at 3%. Because we are so much higher than them. And so that's one of the other impetuses for wanting to separate this out, is that whatever we have to reduce, we're going to have to reduce everybody else by, unless we do separate it out. And so I just hope that's kind of something people keep in the back of their minds in the future when asking our representative on the comp board what the increase should be.
Any other board comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'll take that as a good scolding from Mr. Taylor. But on the other side of that same coin is I hear you, Mr. Radig, quote what the city does. When I was with the city did this. And when I was with the city did that. You remember when the city took a 50% pay increase for their city council?
And I voted against it, yes.
Well, I don't care how you voted. I'm tired of certain people relying on these percentages and numbers and trying to elevate them and make them sound like it's a be-all, end-all. This is not. We're talking real paychecks here. I don't have the luxury of having a full-time job other than this one. And that's nobody else's fault on the board. Not trying to pawn that off. But I am saying that I think for the amount of responsibility that we have to 105-some-thousand county residents, and our per capita runs about 35 cents per salary, whereas there's a couple of counties out there that are high into the threes and one is over $4 per cap. I find it really hard to believe that a little bit of a raise for the Board of Supervisors is going to drive this county into bankruptcy court.
Any other board comments? All right, now we can take a couple public comments here. If we can try to limit it to 3 minutes. I know we don't have to follow those rules, but.
I agree with Mr. Taylor. You guys are overpaid. You are public servants. You shouldn't be paid. You should be on a stipend. Yes, this is and talking, following with Mr. Ang, that wanted a high percent or the paycheck for the supervisors. I think that if he's highly qualified with his degrees, I think he should get another job, not be a public servant. I'm running for public office too, and I'm not running for the paycheck. I'm running to serve the people, and I don't want a paycheck. I want to serve the people. To me, I feel that I need to give it to my country, to my community, and to the people. So I'll be a public servant. I'm not running for the paycheck. Thank you.
And to clarify, Mr. Ung's statements was that he would like to see ours be in line with what the other employees were, not a high percent increase. What Did you have any other
Thank you.
questions there? No? Okay. Anybody else out there? All right. If there's no other discussion, I'd like to move forward to the vote. Anyone else have anything else? All right. All those in favor of item B, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that passes 3-2. Moving on to 15C, action to direct Human Resources Department.
That was for 0%.
0% increase for 23, not to take our wage to 0%.
Which would be even better, right?
Well, that would be the true definition of a servant. So item C, action to direct Human Resources Department to study and make a recommendation on deployed military members and pay differential. Go ahead again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So in light of visiting with deployed military members who are on deployment and then coming back and having some discussions, including with our Veteran Affairs Director as well as our HR Director, I think that this is a policy where we can step up and do something that I don't think is much different than what we did when we allowed those who had fallen in the line of duty to make sure that their families remain on health insurance. And what I mean by that is this isn't something that's mandated by law, but this is something that respects the service and sacrifice of those who leave their families and deploy. And simply, it's really getting at this. When someone deploys, they're no longer making a living through the county, and they're making a living through their military paychecks. And this is called differential. And what that means is that the county would seek to pick up any difference in pay for those who are serving. Had some good discussions, really appreciated with Supervisor Ong, who helped to ask some good questions. And so I've handed you a couple of clarifying things that seek to answer some of his questions as well as some others. So one would be that this would not apply to part-time employees or a member of the Board of Supervisors. And so I want to also make sure that it's clarified that this would in no way benefit me personally. This policy would not extend Woodbury County health care in lieu of TRICARE, so service members have their health insurance coverage picked up while on deployment through TRICARE. Oftentimes, we're actually saving money because we don't backfill positions. It is done through overtime, by which a person may be having their hours paid at time and a half. However, if there's a motor grader or a jailer who is out and is no longer in that position, the county is not contributing to his or her health insurance coverage, which could be around $19,000 a year. The calculation of the military member's pay should include base pay, basic housing allowance, hazardous pay, and other combat pay. And to clarify, this would only be for those who are deployed outside the United States for a period of 90 days or greater. And any differential will only be used after the 30-day entitlement paid out by the county as mandated by law. And then finally, working with our HR director, this would require application. This is done in Polk County, by the way, but this would require application on behalf of the service member to submit his or her leave earning statement and simply to compare. This would be the difference between what is made in the deployed environment versus your normal county paycheck and something that would be made up, again, by way of differential. This will probably apply to fewer than 10 county employees in any given year. And so with that, those are some opening comments. I don't believe this is a proposal ready to be voted into policy tonight. Rather, it's a sort of a halfway discussion point, more informational than action, but to potentially direct our HR director to keep working on this and to take any of your questions, comments, or concerns.
Well, I don't know if we actually have to have a motion to direct staff to do something, but it does make the board unanimous in a direction for staff to do something. So, I think it's kind of like our, earlier we tasked her with kind of an early retirement. she brought forward the proposals, and we went forward with that in the way that we did. And I don't know necessarily where this will lead if we take, you know, whatever recommendations you have and put something together. We're not like Polk County where we have a, you know, $208 million property tax budget, you know, but, you know, I don't know what else. Anybody else thinks? Rocky?
I would agree with the statement, we're not like Polk County, and so one of the issues and concerns I was speaking with Mr. Taylor about was just the time required and the tracking required for our HR department, orders of magnitude smaller than Polk County, I'm sure. And so a lot of these follow-ups here do address a lot of those concerns. We're not going to be looking at, you know, I think it's helpful to include the total compensation from the military members' pay. I think it's you know, good to point out that this is, you know, applicable in a very limited circumstances where, you know, I think we have, I don't know if you've discussed it already in this item, but just a few it would apply to. And I think it's a good gesture. So, you know, I think it's a work in progress, and we've made quite a bit of progress on clarifying, you know, just some issues that would make it easier for us as a smaller county that's not Polk County to do something like this.
So Melissa, if it were, come on up here since I'm going to ask you a question. If it were something like 10 employees a year, is that something you would need additional staff to be able to do the work that's maybe looking at here, or is...
I think, Melissa Thomas, Human Resources Director, I think the majority of the time will be spent basically putting a procedure together, making sure the application is correct for the individual. Like you said, you know, if the situation is only, you know, outside of the United States, you know, where are they going to go? For example, a lot of the orders don't exactly say where they're going. So it'll be just a lot of communication with an individual when they're deployed for over 3 months and getting procedures put together.
One of the things that I might ask, and just to let you all know that I'm asking, is you said there were 8 that were deployed this past year?
Past the 30 days, yes.
Okay. So one
Not
thing...
including yourself.
Okay. One thing that might be of interest, and this is more geared, and I was telling Supervisor Ung this is more geared toward that person who maybe at the county they are making $85,000 a year, but when deployed, they're on the lower end of the enlisted level, right? So you're private, you're lower enlisted sergeant. And so with that, that's where the gap may be. But there may be, of those 8, this may not apply to all but 1 or 2 or 3 even. And so one thing that I'd be curious to ask of each of those individuals, if you could, is simply, did you make as much deployed as you did here? And so in my case, it wouldn't be applicable, so now you're down to 7. And then you just keep, you know, and that way we could come up with what would the financial impact be. And I think it may be either negligible or not even be a total cost based on, you know, the savings and health insurance coverage and so on.
Right. I did do a little research, and 3 of the 8 actually went overseas for over 90 days. So then that would be, you know, brought down to 3 people after asking some questions, and then they'd have to ask about, obviously, what their income was at the time. So.
Okay.
So that was the difference between just beyond 30 days and beyond 90, going from 8 to 3?
Well, the difference between the 8 and the 3 was the overseas.
Okay.
And the reason I don't want it to belong here is somebody could be going to a schooling, you know, and at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and that's not really what this is geared toward. You know, somebody who goes to a 6-week school versus, you know, this person's going to Djibouti for 6 months, you know, and...
Yeah, that's a good point to make, because you know, obviously the Polk County proposal was in response to 9/11 and war in Iraq and much more involvement overseas than we have now. So yeah, I agree. If you're going for school or to training, it's important to parse these things out.
I agree. Okay.
So I don't know that we necessarily need a motion, kind of like the earlier item, but if there's consent for HR to keep working on this, I think that would be.
Well, I'll go ahead and move it, just to, be official.
I'll second it then.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any other discussion on the item? Again, we're just exploring this. It's not coming up with a policy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Moving on to item 16, starting budget review discussion. We're going to start with the conservation. Administration is on page 225 of the conservation budget.
I have for you Dan Heisel, Director of Woodbury County Conservation. Whoops. All right, before we delve into this, in going over our budget, the Conservation Board always looks at holding cost and trying to stay in line. And as you know, we just deal with the operation side of the budget because our salaries are already set through the matrix that was agreed before, long before I was here. And those get put into our budget by the auditor's office. So if you look at our operating budget only, this year we looked at a 1.74% increase with our figures at my office, and that's $8,500 over last year's budget. And $4,000 of that is one line item. So I think we did our job well. I think my board did a good job of going through and trying to be frugal and knowing what you guys are up against. So I just wanted to lead off with that. And then the first sheet I handed you, Woodbury County, if you look at from the economic department, the Iowa Department of Economic Development, you look at the spending and economic impact in millions of dollars in Woodbury County alone. I just want to point out that recreation does have 14% of the pie, and that's $23.35 million. So that's just kind of good information for you to look at. There's also, if you want to look at transportation, I just thought that might be something you'd like to have in your files. So, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
No problem. So any questions for the administration side of it? Pages 2 through 5. Go ahead.
On this budget here, you can only cut a certain dollar amount. You cannot cut line items. That's up to their board. Similar to the conservation or district health. So if you feel you want to cut, you can say $1, 5,000, 100,000, then they have to go back and adjust the lines.
Keep the low figures, Dennis.
Well, I just gave a range. And it's not in this budget, but the next budget, when we get to it, there's another item there.
What if we tell them we want them to stop paying drainage taxes? I'm just kidding. So is this adding an employee on here?
That's the next budget.
I'm not adding an employee.
This one just shows wage plan going up 61,000. What was?
On administration or the next one?
It's on page 2.
What you did there on page 2?
Yep.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I had to go to my,
I think you reallocate employees.
what we did is Tyler Fleming, remember last year when we got the naturalist position, we deleted our GI, going after the GIS position, and we took and we restructured Tyler Fleming's job to include GIS. He was paid for under the 6120 budget, which was the EE budget. So then since he was being through administration, those dollars, it's not an increase. We took the dollars from one fund, moved them over to the other one for spending authority. So he is now underneath administration. So that's where you see that 61,438 increase. That was his salary and stuff, they got moved over from 6120.
So in 6120, we have a 98,000 reduction.
Yeah, and the reason that is because Carrie Sandage, our new naturalist, makes less money because she's a starting employee. And then you take Tyler's salary out of there, and that's why that you have that 98,000 decrease, so.
And you had a decrease in health insurance and the naturalist, and an increase up here. So it's just a shift, plus one employee probably went from family to single.
Any other discussion on Conservation Administration? Not, I'd move to receive it.
Second?
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. All right, any other discussion at all? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to Parks, which is on page 6 through 8. See another increase in wage plan on that.
Okay, you gotta go down to improvement requests. This is where the employee is requested. We put all improvements into the budget. You either leave it or you can take it out. After you hear from the director why the need is there.
Yeah, yeah, we couldn't figure that out, and I was gonna ask that question when I figured, well, I'll find out in the budget review, so. You had put that in there for that technician position that we put in for, and that's been in every year, and that's something that we really need, but I realize this is not the year you're gonna probably do it, so.
What are all the, improvement requests for conservation? Is it just the one?
Just this one, correct.
And then, I guess we're not there yet, but when we get to the equipment that he given us here, is this something we could look at using COVID funds for? Is that potential?
Potentially. It's conservation.
Okay.
And that's in his other budget. That's 130,000, I believe.
That's in the,
Well, let's see.
It's in this budget.
Right here, on page,
I think you already went by it.
Or 6 through 8? Or was that in
I think
admin?
it's in administration.
Yeah, we already passed that, we
Okay.
moving on.
Yeah, on page 4 is where the 130,000 is.
Yeah.
You're talking about using local government relief funds? Okay.
Possibly, yes.
That could just be a potential funding source for that, as opposed to a reserves or debt levy or any other general basic.
And with those relief funds, as you know, there are conservation, some of the stuff we do does fit very well into those criteria, and we'll come forward sometime and with some projects when the time is right, I guess, because you haven't talked about the other 6.4 million, the use of that. So there's some things like water replacement and sewer at the park that fit in real nicely. So.
Well, I'm going to vote to remove the improvement requests. So I guess if I'm making a motion, I'm going to have it moved without that in there. What was that amount there?
69,753.
Can I comment on that?
Go ahead.
And I understand that, and I get that. But as I put in that, I hope I put in the notation for that. Southwood District is the only district that does not have a technician position. I know Rick, the previous director, had come to you looking for this before. But in the Southwood area, with all the areas, our district has the most acres to manage and the least amount of employees. The other ones are tax full, so at some point we would like to address that and get that technician position filled. It's tough, but we're making it, but we'll just keep coming back to you with it. But I understand why it was not funded this year.
Any seconds?
Second.
All right, so I got a motion by Raddick, second by Wright. Any other discussion on this?
That to receive that budget reduced by that amount?
Correct. Was it 69,053? what was it, 69, 550? I don't remember what it was.
69, 753.
Okay. 69, 753.
Yes, 69, 753. Correct.
Good thing you can read.
Well, with no other discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Moving on to item 3, the natural list, which is on 9 to 10.
This is where you move one employee up to the administration.
I'll go ahead and move it.
He already moved it up to administration.
I guess to receive it.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Young. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to the Nature Center, pages 11 and 12.
He left everything the same.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item 5, REAP into. That's
Five,
non-tax,
6, and
number
7
13.
are non-tax. We don't tax for it. So basically, it's money in and out. It's their discretion how they want to spend it.
I would move to receive all 3.
So you're going to move to receive 5, 6, and 7 altogether?
Correct.
Is that? Okay.
I would move to receive REAP.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye. I would move to receive.
Well, I got to announce it yet. All those opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to 6, Nature Center, which Jeremy Teller just moved to receive out of order. Not to get a second. Motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to item 7, Conservation Reserve.
Rocky's
Go ahead.
off.
Just information, he can confirm this. This is the fund he's going to pay back the loan that we're going to make for that road improvements down at Browns Lake. So that is about 1.2 million. It'll be in our CIP, but we'll spread that one over 10 years, and he knows what the principal and interest payments potentially will be. So that'll be paid out of this fund by transfer from this fund to the debt service. So it's no cost to the taxpayer.
So there was a visual motion by Taylor. Second by Raddick. All right, so motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes 4-0. We have lost our phone connection. Moving on to the auditor's budget.
Can I get one thing before we go
You
on
can
my
get,
budget?
sure thing.
In our budget, I see that Dennis and the auditor's office had put in the 2.75%, which you talked about as cost of living. So when you come up with, I know you're discussing raises for the employees, you don't know what that's gonna be yet, but when you set that, then that'll come back into our budget. So you're not, it'll change these figures that are up there for the wages of the employees right now. So when you accepted my budget with these figures, it only had the 2.75. So if you decide to give 4% above that, let's say you're doing the 6% for inflation, you'd have 3.25 to add to those figures, correct? I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so right now, my understanding from our budget analyst is that that's just a placeholder. The 2.75 could be
Yeah,
1.25 or 6.7, right?
I just want to clarify that you accepted the budget as presented, that could change, because we don't have control of that, you guys do. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
That's all.
Thank you, I know you guys are under the time here, but any questions, give me a shout. Supervisor Taylor will be at our meeting, so.
Yeah. And just to clarify, any conjecture on any wage increases, for employees or staffs or under union contract or whatever, nothing has been on the board agenda yet for that, and what one board member's opinion may be is always different from the board as a whole. So please don't anybody, build a swimming pool with their planned pay increase. Moving on to the auditor. B1 is the recorder, pages 2 to 5.
Diane Swoboda Peterson, Deputy Recorder. Hello. My biggest increase is in the machinery and equipment computers. Last year, Michelle up in IT department gave me an incorrect figure and I was $1,230 short. So that's what I increased that by this year. And my overall budget, if you take that out of it, only increased $375.
Well, I will move to receive it.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. I almost reversed that. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to records management, which is non-tax. That's 6 and 7.
We just plug in whatever balance is there. It doesn't affect taxes.
Move to receive.
Any authority.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to, thank you, the auditor's budget, pages 8 through 10.
Michelle Scaff, Deputy Auditor. So this budget covers the finance side of the office. You'll see a few increases in organized employees. Last year, I believe it was, you approved to move one of the elections clerk to the finance side. Very thankful for that move. We have hired a new individual as of May of 2021. So you'll notice an increase on that line, and you should see the offset on that organized employee line in the elections budget. You'll also see an increase in the maintenance contracts. We have a new Esri mapping software for some of the real estate work that's done on the finance side, and we didn't have that software before. And also, we've had a slight increase in printing costs due to the move of the finance side, and we're using another printer that was underutilized in the past. Aside from that, it's pretty much similar to what it has been in the past years. I also wanted to note, this is small, but the parking for all of the departments that have budgeted parking is going to go up by $50 per spot for parking ramp. So that line would actually be $1,400 instead of $1,300. Sure, we can scrape it up from somewhere else.
I'll move to receive it. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Wright. Any other discussion on the auditor's budget? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 4, elections administration. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is on page 11 through 13.
I'm Steve Hoffmeyer, the Deputy Commissioner of Elections.
Are travel expenses down the last couple of years? Maybe this is for both because of COVID and
Yes.
sort of everybody tapping the brakes on that. Is that a
Right.
fair statement?
We budgeted for them, but things didn't happen. More things are being done,
Okay.
through Zoom and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I see this as the 9% plugged in on something that gets brought up later in the year.
All elected officials and deputies were plugged into what the comp board recommended. We go from there.
I'll move to receive it as is. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any other discussion on it? Okay.
Professional services? Does that entail everything that's listed down below, the app update, the Evil Twin software, which, interesting name?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So those are expenses that we anticipate, the 7215?
Yes, that's correct. Those are annual fees.
Okay. What is the Evil Twin?
That's the
It's a where you vote app.
Okay.
software app.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to 5, general election, which is on page 14, and I see is a no change. I'll move it.
It's an increase.
Is it? Oh, yeah, because from 0, yeah.
The primary drops off and the general comes on.
That's right, yeah, sorry. No change from 2 years, actually, it's less than 2 years ago.
Can somebody, sorry, can somebody remind me, where are we at in terms of, remember we did like a CIP for voting machines at some point?
It's with the latest equipment that we got was the iPads, replace laptops. And Dennis can tell you about that, where we're at on all that.
Yeah, when we talked about it, we thought we had an extra 170,000 whatever. When I asked the question, I didn't understand there's still a bill outstanding that came in. So I have added the 171,000 as a CIP for this current year, but we used the money that we had extra, 400,000, to buy the sheriff's radios and the cameras in the cars.
As far as voting machines in general, are we good and all caught up?
We're done with any major expenses for equipment.
Okay. Thank you.
So I moved it. Do we have a second, or no?
I said for a while, sorry.
Oh, okay. I heard perpetuity.
4 more years.
Second?
So we have a motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any other discussion on this? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to C, emergency services. Item 1 is emergency services on page 2 through 3. And welcome for your first experience here.
Thanks. Andrew Dono, Emergency Services.
Did we have,
There's 2 items in this one. First, we'll do the hazmat. That's been shifted from this department over to emergency management. It's more appropriate over there. The question was raised by Emergency Management Director Mayor Scott that you're taxing us for, you're taxing the city. Yes, this is a countywide levy under emergency services, which all cities are taxed. And if we move over EMA, that's also a countywide levy. So all the cities pay with it, and that's the way the code's set up. So it's just shifting from his budget to EMA.
Yeah, it was, I think when it was originally EMA and Emergency Services together, they just didn't move that to the emergency management budget, so we felt like that would be better in that office rather than mine.
And the second big item would be the improvement request. His overall budget is up 79,000. 88,000 of that is the improvement request, and he has a few other increases there he can explain there, but gas and oil is definitely going up.
Okay, so Dennis, you just said it's up 79,000.
It's down 79,000, but that includes the 88,000, so actually, if you took the 88 off, you're down 150,000. But the 2.75 is figured into all the budgets here. This 88 is additional money on top for salary improvements.
Down 79 and up 88.
Yes, the number reflects, I'm sorry, you're up 79,000, but that 79,000 includes that increase of 88,000. That's included. So I'm saying if that 88 was deleted,
You'd
then
be
you'd
down
be down to a
9.
negative.
You'd be down about 9.
Right.
Okay, now I got it.
It's down a little bit because we moved 25,000 from EMS over to EMA.
So is it a fair statement to say everything's copacetic except, let's talk about the 88, if we're otherwise just down 9? Is that?
Well, I think that's probably the, elephant in the room on every budget is the improvement request.
Yeah.
I don't think that your request is out of hand. In fact, I would expect you to ask that, but, from a budgeting standpoint, we probably aren't going to be able to do.
Well, I don't know if y'all have the improvement request itself.
I've seen it.
It's in the back here on the CIP.
Yeah, the reason I was moving towards that was I was trying to compare prices to what Sioux City's paramedics and firefighters make, since our paramedics and firefighters and EMTs do the same thing they're doing. They're just doing it in the city. We're doing it in the county. So that was the main reason, and I've got 3 employees that has over 20-plus years of service that's been here for a long time, and, they've put in a lot of service for the county, and I feel like they should be compensated a little more than what they are right now. And I've talked to the guys about it a lot, and they feel that this would be a good move. That's why we put it in at this, and I was trying to meet halfway, so at Sioux City, they're making, if you have X amount of years of service, some of them are making $27.32 an hour, and then the highest right now at 20 years of service is making $28 an hour, and I would like to move all my EMTs to $21.53, and all the paramedics as well to $21.53. So it would be almost, I think, $1.58 raise for the medics, and then $3 almost for the basics, if I've done my math correctly.
The actual numbers are on your CIP, page 9. If you go
CIP,
back here,
page 9.
CIP, it's page 9, is the form he's referring to.
I think it's almost $1.07, or sorry,
Do you have page 9? I'm missing mine.
dollar, or not,
It's in
50,
CIP.
sorry. It was almost 7.5%, I think, if I've done that right.
Which one are you talking about here?
So, Dennis, I think we're all missing that page. And I know I did have it
Page 9.
in CIP.
You don't have it in there?
Looks like this.
I don't think anyone, I did have a personal copy of it, but I don't know
Here,
what
I can give
happened.
you this one to look through here, you can pass it around.
And so what's highlighted in the blue is what Sioux
Oh,
City.
you got it?
Is that it? It's the very
Yeah.
last page in the binder.
Yeah, page
I don't-
9.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it wasn't in CIP, it was in a different tab.
Improvement request,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, so if you look at the blue highlights, that's what Sioux City's currently at, and then proposed budget for us that we were asking for wages-wise was $23.53, and then you'll see the breakdowns from there.
So you're comparing wages to other wages?
Yes, sir.
You're at about 7%.
Yes, sir.
Fairly equal, well, maybe equal cost of living.
Yes, sir. Just, like, they ran a lot of COVID calls, and I think that's a lot to do with why they need a pay increases. They ran their tail off, and then, of course, not having a medic for half of the year this year, having a backfill, that was pretty tough on them as well.
This is where we could look at COVID funds into this budget, I think.
Potentially, yes.
Only thing is you're patching with one-time.
Yes,
Money's right.
yeah, you're absolutely correct.
I wouldn't mind us looking at local replacement funds for this as well, but I almost wonder, is that going to be seen as something that we do into perpetuity, or is it going to be a one-time bonus kind of thing,
What do you mean by local replacement funds?
That's what I'm referring to as what you call COVID funds, I call local replacement.
okay.
Because otherwise, people come over and they say, what are you doing for COVID, when there are a whole host of parameters by which we can use these funds.
Sure.
So, sorry for the sidebar.
No, that's why we get clarification. Any other questions on it?
Just for form purposes, would we want to remove it and reconsider it later like we removed the other request?
Well, personally, I'm of the feeling I definitely want to do some kind of improvement, just not to the percent that's requested. And like I said, I actually don't feel like it's out of line. It's just how we get to where we need to be in our budget.
And I totally understand what y'all are saying. They're just, like I said, running late night calls, and I mean, they've been running their tail off. The shift today, have already ran 6 calls, and
Well, I got to tell you, there's no way I could do what these guys got to do. I can't see blood, so nobody cut themselves, please. No paper cuts.
So the percentage increase that's being proposed right now is what, generally speaking?
Well, range, let's see. Let me
Maybe.
figure it here real quick.
About what the supervisors was asking for.
2 cents.
For that first group of 3 there, it runs 17.5%. For the second individual is the second one individual is 64%.
oh, sorry, that's if you look at where it says for the second individual, that's the advanced EMT. So he's in between the basics and the paramedics.
Why such a disparity?
So originally, from my understanding, was when they done the price evaluations of how much their wages were going to be, the advanced EMT, they were trying to make it that all the basics were going to work towards their advanced and then to their paramedics. So they were trying to give them more of an incentive to work towards that. That's from my understanding. Welty was here when that was going on, so he might be able to answer that a little better than I was, but than I can. But I'm pretty sure, from what I've been told by multiple people, that's what that was.
Your next group of 3 people there is out of the paramedic budget. That's 13.8%.
And that's for C3 on our agenda today, right? That you're saying that comes out of the paramedics budget?
Yes.
So that's on, so that group of 3 is C3, but the first part is all C1 in our budget.
Yes, sir. So, and y'all might be familiar with this. This is my first time up, but you know, we have the paramedic budget that comes out of rural basic, I think, right?
Paramedic comes out of general basic
General
and rural basic, we split it in half.
Yes.
Yep,
Then
and
you have the
emergency
regular-
services out of general service,
Yes, sir.
general sub,
General sub.
yeah.
No, I'm sorry, general basic. General basic. So we have a transfer from general basic over to emergency paramedics fund and also from rural basic, same equal amount, we split in half. So half's countywide and half's rural only. And then the last one on the first page is just splitting the salary that's there now. You're requesting, I believe, an additional quarter of an employee or eighth of an employee? something
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, and I think that one was, I think former Chairman DeWitt said that we didn't have to bring that as an improvement request because we're not adding or taking away any money. We're just splitting the position in half. It's a part-time position that's going to turn into a 3/4 time.
So that one's just a wash there. Wash.
Worse. So was that a motion from Matthew Ung?
No, I didn't make a
okay.
motion.
Also, I don't think it's a,
I was just, I mean, why are we,
We seconded it, so,
I did?
yeah.
What was the motion?
Well, Pat told me what the motion was.
I thought I saw in your eyes that you wanted to move toward the end of the budget for review. As
So
an
you're
improvement
moving
request.
it without the improvement request and bringing it back at review.
Sounds like something I would do.
Sounds like something he said.
Sounds like something I would second.
Please just be conscientious. Like I said, the guys are really, like I said, they're working hard and late nights and multiple calls, and especially COVID and the way the Omicron virus is going, we don't know what's going to happen. They've been running their tail off. So.
I guess to give some rationale for Supervisor Ung's perceived motion would be that if we're going to do some sort of difference rather than just 2.75%, that's going to be subject to this as well. So I would hate for us to do, and I'm not suggesting what it's going to be, but another number, and then that compounds on top of this without knowing what that number is going to be.
That's a fair point.
So,
But don't stress so much on comparing to other things. Just come up with a number. What do you think they're, what do you think they're worth?
I came up with a number, but
You know?
I didn't want to bring that one.
Well,
The new $1 million a year wage.
Yeah.
how much is a life worth?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
$50 an hour.
so I think we have a motion and a second to
$50
defer to the
an hour.
end of
Okay,
final budget review, this improvement request, and revisit it.
all right, so we have a motion by Matthew Ung and a second by Jeremy Taylor to move to receive the emergency service minus the improvement request of which dollar amount?
$88,740.
No, it's only 51,913 on this one, right?
Well, I got it all in the emergency services budget right now.
Oh, you didn't separate it out into the
Separate it,
paramedics?
no.
Okay,
So it'd
But
be,
I just want to reiterate, we do a wage plan February 1st, so at that point, after the board decides on the wage plan, we can, if it changes from 275 to 10, 5, 2, 3, whatever number, then we can readjust and see where his plan would fall in after the wage plan stuff is done.
So as it was submitted, there's a number in there.
Yes,
that you're
88,000,
going to reduce.
740 reduced,
so you're going to reduce,
88 what?
740,
Sorry.
88,740.
88,740.
so is that talking about the employees' wage plan, right? Just so I'm tracking.
that's the total
The
number,
total number at the bottom for this.
correct.
This sheet there, yes.
Okay,
The 275 is still in the budget
okay.
for the paramedics, everybody.
Then to be revisited, you said February 1.
Yes.
So the motion is?
So it's by Matthew, second by Taylor, to reduce by 88,740.
That's what I have.
Very good. Any other discussion on the perceived motion? All right, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 2, animal control, page 4 of emergency services.
That's up because of one line item, 4,400.
Was that ammo?
No. Gas and fuel. Gas and oil, I'm pretty
Well,
sure.
it's actually the repair and maintenance of the vehicle.
Oh, sorry, repair and maintenance.
4 of emergency service.
Combination, it's the two items increased, gas and oil and repair and maintenance of the vehicle.
It's a 29% increase of $2,000.
I'll move it.
Second. Motion by Taylor, second by Raddick to receive the animal control budget. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Moving on to emergency paramedic services on page 5. So medical and lab supplies, this kind of stuff you think you could fund with replacement, local replacement?
Local replacement funds.
See, this all can be determined maybe February 1st too, when we find out where we're really at, because we got the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th, I have to be done. So we got the 1st, we still review budgets there, we got the 8th, we can review budgets, and the 15th, we finalize them, so I publish.
Why is medical and lab supplies up 60%? Is it just inflation?
Inflation has went tremendously up.
Everybody wants to buy the masks?
Yeah, we were going to order some gloves when I first got here, and I
Couldn't
think
get
it was
'em.
almost like $900 a case, rather than when they were paying like $25 a case. Luckily, the emergency management and health department still had some leftover stuff, some supplies for that, but that also includes needles and airway devices and everything else that we use. It's
Anything
it's
made out of
crazy.
plastic,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
yeah.
crazy just to see the inflation prices on it. I know there's some federal investigations going on right now when it comes to that kind of stuff, but, you know, we got to pay it
Well.
until they figure it out.
We got to buy it. So, you know, I do think we, again, look at any of these kind of opportunities to use those funds.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on, so the way we collect our billing is from January to December. We don't use fiscal year. And towards the late part of December, we're still outstanding for almost $7,000. But when I met with Dawn earlier, she said that that's coming in pretty regularly. And there are a couple other ones. Right now, for 2022, we're already outstanding $1,200. But, you know, of course, that's going to increase because we're, 2 weeks in almost. But that money is collectively still coming in, and we're getting it. We do have some areas where, you know, it's a little tougher to collect money just due to the population, but we are making efforts to bring that money in as fast as possible.
All right, so I will move to receive it. I have a motion by Raddick, second by Wright. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 4, EMS training, which is on page 4. Is that right? 4? That can't be right.
This is in and out anyway.
Oh,
Whatever receives for training, he spends for training. No taxes.
Second.
motion by Wright, second by Taylor. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. I need to get your cell number too at some point if,
Yes, sir. I don't know it by heart, but I'll give it to you.
okay, yeah.
Am I done?
You are done.
All right.
Well, unless you want to comment on medical examiner, you can stick around.
Okay, medical examiners under supervisors, page 4.
And what'd you have?
Is that something that we're going to have discussion on a proposal, cost savings measures,
On
transport?
medical examiner? Yes, possibly.
So I brought Welty and Dr. Bramers here as well. We were just going to touch on some things that we have put together, and then I don't know exactly, because I was out last week, what Dr. Bramer has. I think she just pretty much was going to go over and through her budget.
I'm specifically looking at a discussion that we had, I believe Supervisor DeWitt, myself, and the two of you in terms of the cost savings measure to the county by doing some of our own transporting.
So I didn't realize I was supposed to bring that in.
And I'm springing that on you, so my apologies.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I didn't realize I was supposed to bring it in, but I can read it off my phone, the email that I sent you and Supervisor DeWitt. But I think we do have an option that.
To save how much money approximately?
What did we say earlier?
And if it's not ready, because I realize we're probably, but I want to make sure that we have something that the full board can discuss and budget off of and look at and kick.
What kind of transport are you talking about, though? Are you talking in Sioux City or out of county into Sioux City?
So I think it was all of the transports from the rural side to within the city side to going to Ankeny if we have to. That's where I understood it from.
So we're talking more from the county into the city and from the city to Ankeny. I think that's where your biggest expenditure is from taking people from the city down for a state autopsy. Okay? So that's part of our proposal. And then the other part was the transports within the county to Sioux City, to the morgue, those that would not qualify necessarily to go to Ankeny.
So with that, I just need and would like to have the means and mechanism to get this thing in front of the full board And so that everybody can kick the tires and have kind of a full informed discussion. Because it sounds like it's a proposal that has some merits, but I just don't want it to be kind of a 2 supervisor, 1 back room, and a great idea that dies on the vine kind of thing.
So, I don't know if y'all know about it, the original plan that we had talked about, we met with Dr. Bramer as well, was talking about medical examiner investigators going out when we have deaths in the county from the city and so on throughout the county. And that's to speed up the process and to see if there's cost-saving benefits for the county when it comes to if it has to go to the ME or to Ankeny, or if it's just going straight to the funeral home. So that's
Because that cost is incurred right now. How? How is that being paid for?
Transport-wise, the local volunteer departments get paid $350 for each transport that they do, and then within Sioux City Fire and EMS do it, and it's $350 as well. Of course, Sioux City has more deaths than we do out in rural, but so I think last year, I think they paid almost $70,000 within transport fees just to Sioux City alone for their transports. And then for the county side of it, we had some departments that transported 10 times and only billed us for 5 times, and then there's some departments that transported all those times and they billed us for all of it. So we're looking at almost $100,000, I'm saying, in transports. And then the medical examiner investigator side of those things will help Dr. Bramer out, because every time there's a death in the county, we have to call the medical examiner, and she will either receive the case correct or not receive the case when it comes to that, right?
That's correct.
Yes. So she either takes the case or she doesn't, and that goes by the Iowa code, and there's 10 things per se, right, that's on the code?
Yes.
That says that if she's going to accept the body or not, and I don't want to get into the woods about it, but that's pretty much what that is.
How much is it to Ankeny?
How much it? So they've changed the Iowa code on that. It's I think for funeral homes, it's a $1,000 trip up, $1,000 back plus mileage.
I thought it was like 15 both ways, so it ended up 3,000 every trip.
Well,
I think we know.
I think they just changed it from what Heather said. I think
you're right.
I asked the state medical examiner, you know the number, you guys had heard that it was 1,000 each way plus mileage.
I'm pretty sure
And
it's,
Dr. Dennis Klein, the Iowa State Medical Examiner, was not aware of any code or legislation to support that, but he was gonna check into it and get back to me what it was.
I know there's a new code rule out there, because a funeral director friend of mine, he just transported a body down, and he said they used to do it for free for years and years and years, part of community service, but they're not allowed to do that anymore. They're not actually allowed to transport it for free anymore.
what do you have there, Dennis?
2 things. One, we talked about a year ago to Potawatomi County. They do have an investigator, plus a couple people under the investigator. Has reduced their medical examination costs quite a bit. And right now, we're running 6 months and a half, we're running at 60,000. So it's way down from what it was last year. For the total budget, not individual line items. For the total budget, we're at 60,000 currently today.
The number of deaths is way down. I mean, we go by a calendar year also, and for 2021, we had 100 fewer deaths reported to the medical examiners compared to 2020. 2020 was an exceptional year, bad year for death. 2021 was more in keeping with 2019 and 2018, a little over 300 deaths reported to the medical examiner's office in Woodbury.
What do you all have going on at the beginning of next week? On Tuesday, what do you have going on? Anything?
Just being here.
That'd be great. I wonder, Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of the meeting, would you entertain them giving us a concrete proposal and kind of a before and after, and asking action by the board on whatever it is that they'll be proposing? Is that?
So we're talking the 18th, that's the sheriff's.
Yeah, we got several, but.
Can we do it the 25th? What do we got the 25th?
You won't be here.
Oh,
I can call in, far be it from me to.
So the 25th, or this week, or next week,
I
I'm sorry.
kind of prefer the 25th, I think.
25th would work because there's a lot of things on, but they're easy ones.
Yeah,
Let's do it the 25th.
does that work?
25th, is that good?
I don't know, I can check.
Okay, we'll get back to you. I'm good.
I just don't want it to become a broader thing while we're doing budget, but I think it's an important one, so.
We've already cut that budget, 9,000.
As I say, I thought we already did the medical examiner.
Huh?
I thought we already did that under,
We reduced 9,000, but we're 269, reduced it down to 260, but with the numbers now, you probably knock another 100,000 off.
if they do the transports.
Yes, well, that might even cut it more, because 60,000 right now is based on, them, whoever's doing the transports now. We've only spent 60,000 this year, and she said there's down 100 deaths. Well, that's quite a bit of money. We figured this out.
This is gonna take some sort of board action. It's not, they just don't go ahead and do whatever they're gonna,
You gotta approve it.
right, so the 25th sounds like a date.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, so
We'll move it to the 25th. Okay.
now, moving on to D, medical examiner, and I thought we did do this last week.
You did, you cut 9,000, but you deferred it, you accepted a $9,000 decrease, but you referred to this week to review again,
Okay,
to see what the transport was, things like that, and what the doctor said was you're 100 deaths down, so you can go from 260 probably even further down, just depends what they come up with their plan.
okay. Well, so then this basically item today, well, then we're gonna defer to next week. Unless, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I don't, just, numbers of deaths were down. I mean, we don't know what it's gonna do. It's, hopefully we don't have a 2020 year again.
And we're trying to get down, this budget down, because we got a long ways to go, and that's what we have reserves for, or local assistance funds, SLR, whatever that is. We can probably use that for medical examiner too. But we want to start splitting this funds, COVID, into 15 different departments. We have to keep accurate records on this, that we're using the money. Better go one big department and still do your cutting.
Dr. Reiner, do you have any comments on this proposal? If you're not able to be here in a couple of weeks, are you supportive, or do you know enough of what they?
I am supportive.
Okay.
I was very happy to meet Andrew, very happy to hear his ideas, particularly on bringing on some medical examiner investigators for the county. Like we've mentioned in the meeting, we're one of the larger counties in the state. We do not have MEIs or medical examiner investigators. You have me as the medical examiner and my 3 partners who are deputy medical examiners. We take call 1 week at a time and take all of the death calls. We are not going to scenes like we should be. The state medical examiner's office really wants us to go to the homes, go to accident scenes, things like that, to be investigating more, and that's a fair thing, and it's good for the community, and it's something we should be doing. We just don't have the personnel to do it. So to have some investigative help would be really great. And our hope, if we have a medical examiner investigator going out to a scene, going out to the county, there may not be a need to bring that patient back to the morgue for the medical examiner to look at. If you have a trained, competent investigator who can go out and do some interviews, talk to the family, talk to law enforcement, talk to the paramedics, look at the patient. We're hoping it'll help the doctors out, but it'll be good for the patient and the family, and ultimately for the county if that patient wouldn't have to come back to the morgue.
So how would
Might
we?
streamline the process a bit more, but.
How would we maybe get somebody on his staff trained to do that too? Oh, he already is.
St. Louis University.
He is.
That's why we want to split this up.
A lot of the other counties have pathologist assistants that do it, or paramedics that do it. And the state medical examiner's office is going to be offering a training course, a 5-day training course in July, I believe, at the DMAC campus for crime scene investigation and just death scene investigation in general. So folks could go down there and get some training and, learn how Dr. Klein and his crew would really like the counties to be proceeding with it, you know, out-of-hospital death, so.
I think that's very helpful, and we don't want to waste your time. And so if you're not able to come on the 25th, just hearing those, just hearing those comments and that you've had some collaboration and discussion is very helpful to us.
I think it'd be really nice.
We'll put them right at the start of the budget.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So you can come in early and get out of here.
Okay. But I
Just have some
appreciate
around
working with you two to help with this, and Rocky also, I know, has talked about it, so. Kind of exciting, nerdy exciting, but.
Nerdy
We think nerdy. No, I think it would be a good thing, so. But it could, bringing the MEIs on would be more of a cost, but hopefully we would save it on the transport end, on the back ends.
Great.
Could that staff member curtail some of the trips to Ankeny even? Yeah, that's an expensive trip.
That's an expensive trip.
They're back, yeah.
Any other questions?
I think it's really good. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, nerdy good.
Go nerds.
All right, you have patiently waited. We have saved the treasurer for E1 here, Motor Vehicle Department, pages 2 through 5.
The last nerd of the night.
No, we still got civil service.
So speak for yourself.
Hi, Tina Bertrand, Woodbury County Treasurer. What do you got? Are there any really big questions that you have?
Overall budget picture increase, anything big or?
Overall budget picture increase, I mean, outside of salaries, obviously the salaries make up, you know, roughly 80%, 90% of our budgets.
Oh. I was having a hard time finding you in the book. Sorry about that.
County treasurer's alphabetical elected officials.
Yeah, right after county supervisors.
Yep.
I didn't realize you used that tricky alphabet.
So I mean, in general, if we were, you know, kind of, I look at our department kind of holistically with motor vehicle and tax and not necessarily separate it out. Overall increase for the expense side is a .028. The bulk of it's going to be with salary increases, and right now they're just basically projected based on contract, because we have, of the 19 staff members that we have for deputies, and the balance of them are union contracts, so that's pretty much set for us. The largest area of increases that we have are going to be related to, on the expense side, will be related to postage. There was a postage increase in August. There was another one planned in January, and they're talking about another one somewhere before the end of this fiscal year. So that's a big thing. The other two big expenses that I think on the increases that I have in there are some office chairs for the staff. So we get about 20 of them. We do have a few staff members who are complaining about ergonomics, things like that. And then really security cameras was one thing that when I did start, as I was appointed in April, and did a little bit of an assessment of the office conditions, just kind of an overview. Security was an issue that was brought up by staff in terms of, well, just the volume, I guess, of customers that we see. We did take a look at it, and our security system is quite old. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say quite old, but old in terms of technology standpoints. I think it was 2006, 2009. There are several points that could probably use a little bit more in terms of cameras. So I have about $6,000 worth of a budget increase for that. And that's just a budgetary number to be able to obviously bid it out. The other thing that I do have budgeted, which is probably, got my budget numbers here, it represents about a $16,000 increase of our expenses would be for a virtual lobby. That was something that I think I did discuss when, during the appointment or the interview process. it is sometimes considered maybe an appointment system, but there are several options actually out there, and this would actually help in several ways to be able to manage workflow in the office, but more importantly, with COVID coming, you know, and some of the concerns that people have, it would give people the ability to actually wait maybe outside of our office instead of inside of our office. And it's not the same kind, the one that I've actually looked at is not necessarily the same kind that you've heard, that you hear that they have at driver's license, where it could take you a month. There are options out there where there could be some hybrid opportunities to be able to still allow walk-ins and still allow people to plan ahead a little bit and actually plan an appointment to come in.
What's the anticipated cost of that system?
$16,000.
Keeping people in their cars, that lends itself very well to COVID/local.
That's my favorite line to wait in.
Local COVID.
But I mean, with COVID, they did actually, they laid out the lobby area a little bit to help mitigate. We had some one-way traffic coming through. We still have our drive-up window that is used quite extensively right now. We have not brought back some of the old setup that they had, which was a large waiting area. We still try to queue people coming in and get them through, and the staff is great. You know, we have 7 full stations that, you know, they take those people in as quickly as they can. There's probably about a 15-minute average time period that people spend time talking to our staff, so.
Yeah, I've never spent more than 5 minutes waiting in the line there now in the last, so they're very good about getting through everybody there.
We will have the line go out the door and up to the street. So.
I'd move to receive.
I'll second that. Of course, any other discussion? I know this is one that'll also come up at our February 1st review with all the elected official discussions, but
Yeah.
any other questions, discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 2, which is the tax department, pages 9 through 12. No, he's been gone. Right, he's still gone, right? On the, yeah.
So for the tax, it's basically the same discussion. A large share of the costs are split when it comes to some of the employee type stuff, the virtual lobby, security cameras, kind of split either pro rata share or 50-50 depending on what they are. The postage is probably can be more applicable to the tax department just from the volume of paperwork that we send out on taxes.
See, mileage jumped a little there. I know it's only $200, but still.
Mileage did jump a little bit. That has more to do with gas prices than it is. I think there was a little bit of an increase in some of the instructions or some of the travel that's related to some of the conferences. Again, that comes down to, well, that's 2 things. Really, a lot of it, though, would be in relationship to the cost of hotels, things like that.
I'll move it.
I'll second. We have a motion by Taylor, second by Raddick. Any other discussion or questions?
How are you liking the job?
You weren't here when I,
Right.
when I took it.
Good.
Hey, you get to miss all the fun stuff, I tell you. Yeah.
Great.
We'll hold it against him. I'm just- All right, well, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much, Tina.
Thank you.
Moving on to the final one of the day, that's civil service out of general basic, pages 1 to 2 of which page here?
Civil service, there's a tab.
Oh, I see it there.
Right after building services. On this one, this is a budget we put in there. They determine where they want the money, but you have to have a budget of 0.5% of the civil service wages, and I did list those on the second page on page 2. How they divide that up is up to them. Now, they're talking about increasing possibly what Lisa Wilson gets, but I said that's up to you guys, because you get this budget, you're locked into, what's the number, 13,723, then they spend it. You have to levy the money by code, 1.5%. So that's their budget, and they can do whatever they want with it, basically. So it's just formality of showing you what they have so far. They can readjust it throughout the year if they want to give Ms. Wilson more money. Laura Lee called and asked that, and I said, yeah, it's under your discretion what you do. They don't fall under wage plan, as far as I know.
So those dollars are divided between the people on this list?
The what?
The 13,723?
Yeah. What I do, I total all the wages, then take it times 0.05, half of 1%.
And then they divvy that out as they see fit to this group of people?
No, this is just to operate the Civil Service Commission and the Civil Service employee they hire to be the director or whatever they want to call her.
So it's not salaries?
No.
Salary increase?
I think it's on a per, as far as I know, it is not salaries, no. We don't withhold taxes or anything. It comes under professional services. Would come under contractual services. So really, there's nothing we can do with it here. It's just a number we have to plug in because we have to furnish the money.
I'd move it.
I'll second. So any other discussion on that? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 4-0. Moving on to reports on committee meetings. Anybody have any?
Just one correction of the record, the calendar of events. Karen, for next week, the Conservation Board's on Thursday, January 20th. And so I don't have a Conservation Board meeting this Thursday and could keep any scheduled appointments I had, so.
Did we do committee assignments last week?
No, I haven't done that yet. Did you? Now, I did need to ask, because I know I have to be removed from one ship, so. Somebody else was termed out. Who was it? Was it Rocky?
Yeah, I think he was termed out of like SCDC.
That's correct, SEDC. So SEDC. I guess I could always go back to that, just swap them, but.
Sounds good.
So.
Is your intention to keep things relatively the same or
Yes.
play upside down apple cart?
I don't really want to revamp that too much. I mean, if there's anything you don't want to be on, just tell me publicly in front of the people that are also on that board. And no, I'm just kidding. Just text me or whatever, email me.
I like your idea on you two swapping.
So, citizen concern round 2, if you stayed this long. Board concerns, I was going to bring one up February 1st, which is a important meeting date for us, but they are doing that Chamber Des Moines Day that day, so I'm assuming none of us will probably go, but I wanted to bring that up. Anything else?
Yes.
Go ahead.
On January 6th, the U.S. Treasury published the final rule regarding the local fiscal recovery funds. Obviously, that's a big piece of information we need to digest as a board. I've been reading up on it, and of course, a few people that have spoken on it already are, only centering on the one issue of can you use it to build a brand new jail from nothing when there's not even enough money to do that, and that was never the board's motion, which said if applicable. Those two words are kind of important. Anyway, a lot of people prognosticated or promising or prophesying what the final rule would say. I don't think even the out-of-city activists would have anticipated that it would increase the flexibility given to local governments to the extent that it does. And in doing so, it allows a one-time $10 million standard allowance of recovery funds to be spent on government services. So when we say, which is true, and it's not really in debate, that money is fungible, the overview of the final rule states that government services generally include any service traditionally provided by a government. It goes on to state government services is the most flexible eligible use category under the SLFRF program, and funds are subject to streamlined reporting and compliance requirements. And use of the funds under government services may include the provision of police, fire, and other public safety services, including purchase of fire trucks and police vehicles, and, quote, general government administration staff and administrative facilities. That's extraordinarily broad and extremely good for Woodbury County in that it will allow us to leverage definitely 100% of the fiscal recovery funds we have received. So I don't want that to be lost on the public while we have a couple people yapping about one little tiny portion on the back page about one little item. This will be appropriated appropriately and legally as we've always promised. To that end, I am going to be having several agenda items for action next week, which I believe will help the board immensely in navigating the use of these funds and balancing the budget.
Thank you for reading that. I haven't gone through it yet myself. I got to set aside a week to do that. And, you know,
There's a short version, yeah.
There's a long version, 437 pages.
That's right, that's what I meant. And, you know, we've been saying we're going to hurry up and wait for that final rule. Well, it's finally a final rule now, and we can actually figure out what we're going to do with that funding, you know.
And I don't see anything wrong with Woodbury County waiting until we receive the final rule to spend the funds. You know, we have people out there acting like we're going to be, the SWAT team's going to burst through the doors and haul us off to jail, no pun intended. But none of these funds have been spent. And so I think that's important to reiterate. Funds have not been spent. Now that we have a final rule, we're going to appropriate them in a way that is appropriate. Exactly.
Thank you for your work on that.
No problem.
And
I'm also talking with Joshua Woodman as well to make sure we have some guidance there.
I do think that's important to have something that says we've relied upon early, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not just
Yep.
willy-nilly.
And then with the final thing before we adjourn, I just want to say, you know, I never intended to have this meeting go till 7 p.m. I thought that a lot of things were going to go smoother, quicker than they did. But we did have a lot of split decisions on different votes and a lot of things that came up. And I'd just like to reiterate how much I enjoy serving with all of you on this board, and that, you know, at the end of the day, if we don't agree on something, that we maintain a friendship and professional manner and everything. And I just really appreciate being on here with you guys.
We love you too, Keith.
Unplug it. Mother said I'm never supposed to do it like this.